The Late Morning Program with Nam Ras Podcast.
Hare Krishna, everyone. You are listening to the number one Hare Krishna podcast in the world, the Nam Ras Podcast. Venkata, my co-host, thank you for joining me again, driving an hour and whatever to come here.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Chandrashekhara Prabhu on today.
Chandrashekhara, wow.
Hare Krishna, I'm a big
Also known as
to everybody and to you.
Also known as Cyril Wohrer on Facebook. We know you as that on
AKA
Facebook.
American Krishna. Are you still using American Krishna?
Yeah,
That's his Instagram handle.
Hashtag American Krishna.
Yeah. So I've known Chandrashekhara Prabhu for now 25 or so years. God brother of my parents, and came to New Jersey many times as a young brahmachari. And I like having devotees on who are vocal about stuff. That makes for really good podcasting. And Chandrashekhara Prabhu is a vocal person online, and in person, very,
He's like,
is it? I mean, you don't go on
he's
Facebook.
Being, I think the word is coy now. He's being a little coy.
Don't be coy.
Am I really? Oh, oops. I didn't mean to be.
Anyways,
I think he's known for many things.
You've known Chandrashekhara Prabhu for a while,
I've known Chandrashekhara for a while now.
Bhakti Shastri.
But yeah, the sort of, I think the most time we spent together was during an iteration of Bhakti Shastri, which I think I was actually teaching. Like I was teaching Ishopanishad.
Oh, nice.
And it was a very strange batch because if you remember, we also had in our midst, do you remember one of your classmates was one of those kid geniuses from Idaho?
Oh, really?
Do you remember this?
One of the two...
No, but there's more of them, actually.
Yeah, someone in their lineage of
Who drinks the same
who
water.
drinks the same water and eats the same potatoes, and it was a fun. My wife was one of your classmates, but we
go back.
We go back. We lived in the Philadelphia Temple for some time, and then we haven't been in physical contact so much, but we've exchanged some. I don't know if we can call them loving exchanges. We've had some exchanges online. I don't know how Rupa Goswami would describe them, but
it's all love.
We gave and received. So
Chandrashekhara Prabhu, tell us a little bit for the audience, just some context about yourself, really briefly.
Born in L.A., Santa Monica. Spent about 6, 7, 8 years, I think, in Paris growing up. And then back to America at age 8 or 9. To middle school in LA, high school in LA, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica. Went to college, Cornell for a year, then dropped out of college, joined the ashram, lived as I don't want to use the term full-time devotee, that's a problematic term, I think, but, right? But like as a full-time missionary.
Brahmachari, distributing books, LAX.
Yeah, LAX. Spent a lot of years at LAX. And distributed books also on traveling Sankirtan, right? Around America.
Did you describe yourself as a monk? I know that's something that a lot of ISKCON devotees have been doing, particularly in recent years, sort of using the language of monks.
I know, right? As a matter of fact, my memoir, which is now called American Krishna, was called, Monk Until Monday. I have a book, as you know, coming out soon. And
wasn't it was like Monk in Khakis was the original title, or
I don't know, that's so funny.
something like that? I don't know.
Funny.
Thank you.
Just wait, let him talk.
Here we go. Come on, what are we waiting for? Time's a ticking. People are like 2xing this.
And more recently, what have you been up to?
Recently,
Besides the book,
I have a little YouTube channel called American Krishna.
Right.
By the way, there's another channel that I just started just to give references to, because there's a lot of somehow, I got obsessed perhaps with the topic of dress.
Yes.
When I went back, just before I went back to college, did you ever meet Janaki Ram? He teaches at UF now.
Yeah.
Janaki Ram. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So he was at UC Santa Barbara, and I was still in the ashram, and he sent me some quotes from Prabhupada. To the effect that, we're not concerned with dress. There's especially one where Prabhupada says, I did not introduce this dhoti, you did. And to me, that was just like a mind blower.
So before this, you had never heard those quotes or considered that?
Not really. It was when I went back to college myself, and with the precursor of Janaki Ram kind of taking these questions, you know, head on, being in an academic, you know, religious studies context.
Sure.
So how did I get to Janaki Ram here?
We were just what were you
I
doing?
had actually-
no, what are you doing besides the book? What have you been doing? And then you were saying you
So
talk
I have
about
this
dress.
YouTube channel called
YouTube channel.
Easy Bhakti, where so because my I don't know when you say obsession, but fascination with the topic of dress, because I believe it's extremely important for at a civilizational level for the spreading of, you know, Vaishnavism outside of India, and we're talking America right now, in particular. So I made a couple of presentations. I did a lot of research on the topic. Like I combed that Veda base back and forth, up and down, and I have tons of references. So I put those in two videos, and they're on a channel called Easy Bhakti. So if you look at it for the channel called Easy Bhakti on YouTube,
We'll put the link in the description.
yeah. So the other ones, I have another channel and a French one too, because I do have that French side. So I try to also do a little.
Oh, that's
You have
cool.
French roots, yeah.
My father was French.
Oh,
My
that's
father
cool.
was French.
So you do the YouTube videos in French,
Both.
preaching Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, both. One
That's
channel
really cool.
in English, one channel in French.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I teach Bhakti Shastri too.
Oh, that's
Small
right.
Cohort.
Yeah.
And I try to do kirtan as much as possible.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you want to start with something?
Yeah, well, we can sort of dive in anywhere, but I think one of the reasons I asked about the idea of using the nomenclature of being a monk is because I'm also interested in this topic, which is one of the reasons I thought a conversation like ours could be really interesting. I think we're going to end up agreeing. I was speaking with Nam about this just in sort of preparation for the podcast. Knowing that some folks who may know our sort of views on things and histories may expect like a major clash. And I think actually, and I want to just kind of put it out there, that I would not be surprised if by the end of this podcast, we realize we actually probably agree on more than we disagree on. And I also think we're kind of, we may be, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think we may be approaching the sort of same topics from some different lenses. But one of the things I'm really fascinated by is how the identity of being a monastic, how that plays into and complicates this conversation. And so that's why I'm kind of interested also in your time in the ashram when you sort of looked at yourself as a monastic and now kind of not wearing, speaking of clothing, wearing that identity, how you factor that into your understanding of clothing.
I think I can answer that by telling this really cool story that Shraddha Devi, speaking of Philadelphia, told me
Shraddha,
about
yeah.
Ravindra Swarup Prabhu.
Yeah.
Grihasta, for those who don't know, Prabhupada disciple, Grihasta, initiating guru, GBC, right, PhD from Temple University. He tells the story how, and it was confirmed to me by Shraddha Devi, that he went to a GBC meeting in Mayapur, I don't know when, some years back, and he got to the GBC room a little bit early, and there were some sannyasi friends of his, godbrothers, in there also kind of getting ready for the meeting, and one of them told Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, "Hey Ravindra, when are you taking sannyas?" To which Ravindra Swarup Prabhu answered, "No thanks, I'd rather remain renounced."
Oh man,
Talk about a
I
mic
think that's
drop.
a burn, yeah.
what a burn!
Now, so now let's take that. If Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, or a Mahatma, or a Kalakanta, or a Vaisheshika, or a Virabahu, or a Swavas, or a Krishna Chaitanya, or a et cetera, told me, "Hey, Chandrashekhara, when are you going to have a bald head and a ponytail and put on a white dhoti and a kurta?" I would say, "Thanks, Prabhu, but I'd rather remain renounced."
Yeah.
I think there's an issue of falgu vairagya, false renunciation. And that's what I'd love to talk about, this false renunciation and the detrimental effects. Now, of course, you told me just before the podcast, you don't see the correlation between dress and a result of, for example, having minimum growth, we could say that, relatively, with relative confidence, relative growth among the non-Indian ethnic groups of the Vaishnava fold in North America. namely the whites, the Hispanics, the Asia, the blacks, and other smaller minorities.
You think that the growth not being there amongst those non-Indian demographics is because of dress?
In large part, yeah.
Really?
Because of yeah, you know that. You know.
No. But I want you to unpack it more.
I've never heard of it.
No, but
I never asked you about it. I never asked you.
Also in fairness, like and with due respect, and I do mean that. I want to sort of, I would love for our conversation to sort of be respectful, even as we kind of go head to head a little bit. But I think with due respect, you state that as if it's an obvious correlation, and I don't think it's so obvious.
Okay, I'm sorry to make it sound.
No need to apologize, but let's sort of get into where you see that sort of correlation and that link. And
I base that on my own observation for the last 30 years of traveling around ISKCON a lot worldwide.
Yeah.
I travel a lot. Probably for, not very productive results, but whatever it may be, I travel a lot. And based on social science, on studies on the history of religious conversion. And I believe in this model. And here it is. Or this thesis. When you have two groups of people, group A, group B, and you want to, convert, or you want to see people convert from the religion of group A to the religion of people of group B, right? The more cultural differences, and when I say cultural differences, I'm not talking about moral principles here. Because a lot of times people may think, that means being loose on the four regulative principles.
Like watering down some philosophical principle or some practice. Yeah.
No, I'm talking about dress, musical instrumentation, choices in architecture,
food.
That's another one. Language too. Language. When will be the day when we start? In my opinion, I think it would be great that we start singing our songs, Shiguru Charana, even Samsaradava, Tulsi, Gora Artik in English in America.
There have been some attempts to do that as well.
Accompanied by, for example, monastic robes from the Benedictine order, which I think is insane.
Yeah.
It totally goes.
Yeah, we can talk about that as well. So you think that's what kind of tripped up that experiment was
totally tripped up.
Sort of mixing
imposing
in
a monastic
yeah. Which is again why I'm interested in that. See, I find that really fascinating. This sort of
well, that's why with all due respect to Ravindra Sri Prabhu and the dress of all, a lot of our Grihastha leaders, I call it a bleached version of a sannyasi dress.
Right.
So you think the Grihasthas have to dress like normal?
They can dress whatever they want, right?
Yeah.
But I think as a tactic, I think Prabhupada was, there's a quote where Prabhupada, can I just give you this one real quick as a parenthesis?
Yes, please.
And Balavanta Prabhu, he confirmed it to me a few days ago in Atlanta. You saw the short I put on Instagram. I was like, please tell him the story, because we only read it in Sasarup Maharaj's memories.
Right.
Prabhupada was shown a picture of Balavanta Prabhu running for office in a suit and tie, grown out hair. He had tilak, but he was in a suit and tie, grown out hair. And when Prabhupada saw the picture, according to Sasarup Maharaj, he said, this is what I always wanted, that would be known as American Krishnas. And according to Balavanta, who heard it, secondhand, apparently Prabhupada said, from now on, we should be known as American Krishnas. So, and Prabhupada defines the term Grihastha dress in 1977 as nice suit, coat, and pants. So there's all these references where Prabhupada, when he refers to Grihasthas, he American Grihasthas, he doesn't see them in a white dhoti and a white kurta.
Right.
He sees them in pants and coat, and he says, this is actually what I always wanted, Right. So your point about monks, so there's this artificial, monastic. Why do so many Grihasthas, for example, when they go out on book distribution or something, they'll tell people in the streets, I'm a monk.
Do Grihasthas do that?
All the
I'm
time.
sure they do.
All the time.
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, that's
a book.
I find that really strange. Actually,
that's a book distribution
I agree with you,
line,
right?
Yeah.
But it's almost like it's almost like memorizing a line that doesn't even apply to you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a disconnect for sure.
And I think it exemplifies, again, false renunciation. And as I was telling Namras Prabhu, I think there's a direct correlation based on the same cause, namely Falgu Vairagya, false renunciation of matter, right, which actually could be engaged in Krishna's service, and quote unquote material relationships, which can and should be spiritualized. when we see the terrible, tragic story of the first generation of Prabhupada children,
Right.
which were practically disseminated, right? And at the same time, and by the same token, the link, the lack of growth among the white and black and Hispanic, community in America. You renounce fatherly responsibilities to take care of your wife, to take care of your children, then the result, you lose your children, right?
Okay.
The result of giving up your own external culture that you have grown up with, especially if you're ethnically connected in majority to that age-old, or not age-old, but at least centuries, if not millennial-old sartorial culture, you give that up, you artificially renounce it when you're not supposed to. I mean, you don't have to. If you're a monk, socially dead. Prabhupada defines, sannyas as
socially dead, yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you don't have any scriptural necessity to renounce your external dress culture, for example, and we could discuss. Remember when there was this discussion with Hridayananda Maharaj, like you, Janavi, were putting into question the very notion of what is American, what is Western,
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty easy to define.
I'd love to hear you define it then.
Okay.
Because this is a thing.
But let me finish
Yeah,
just
please,
this point.
please.
So when you artificially, in my opinion, give that up, the result is that aside from a very small pocket of Indophiles, of Western or white, blacks, Hispanics who somehow maybe from a past life or just are really attracted or feel very comfortable and neutral with Indian dress, except for that very, very small percentage, you lose out on a lot of people.
See, but here, okay, and I appreciate that. I think that's a really nice articulation of where you're coming from.
So you understand? I mean, did I make my point? Like you got these two groups. So the more cultural differences, the harder it is for people to convert from religion of group A to group B.
Right.
And the more similarities, culturally speaking, there are between people of group A and group B, the easier. And therefore, we could say, like, look at India. Look at the success of ISKCON in India. Because culturally, it's just like, you just put Kali and Ganesh to the side and then you're already barefoot. You already are wearing the, Vedic or Hindu clothes. It's culturally a lot easier to become a Vaishnava coming, let's say, from a Hindu background in India, I think.
Well,
One second. Tell that Laguna Beach story.
Okay. So I was at the Laguna Beach temple maybe 10 years ago, a few minutes before a Sunday Arti, a Sunday Kirtan, Sunday feast. And 3 or 4 or 5 teenagers came in, and I could see they were there for the first time because they were kind of looking around, And they walked in, and somehow I ended up talking to one of them. His name was John, nice 17-year-old kid, white kid, Laguna Beach, middle class, upper class. Prabhupada, by the way, said, fallen yogis take birth in Laguna Beach. I don't know if you heard that one.
I did hear that, yeah.
Oh, wow.
You heard that one?
I have heard
That's
that.
pretty cool.
Yeah.
So as we're talking, he's a little bit reticent. And so he immediately says, listen, I want to tell you, I'm a Christian. I belong to Cavalry Church or Hillsong. I don't know if it was Hillsong, Cavalry, one of those evangelical, which, by the way, I think is the model that resembles the most Lord Chaitanya's Grihastha pastimes in Navadvip.
Yeah, wow, we can talk about that because I strongly disagree with you there.
Okay.
Or if that's true, I may need to rethink my allegiance to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement because I ain't about hanging out with. Okay, I think there are better comparisons.
Continue the story.
Theology aside. And,
That's a big aside. But okay, please continue the story. There.
No, it's not. It is a big aside. But then you look at the externals of how people do church. Monk versus there's three as a it's a small parenthesis. There's 3 models basically. There's 3 models.
Yeah.
In terms of religious dress code related stuff. In terms of religions out there on the planet.
Yeah.
There's a model where the priests have some sort of uniform that distinguishes them from the rest of society.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the parishioners, the congregation also have some sort of uniform that distinguishes them from the rest of society.
So what's an example of that model?
Hasidic Jews,
Okay.
Shabbat, Sikhs, Amish.
Because of the turban, you're saying?
Yeah, even the Sikhs, like at least Sikhs in America, you see most of them, they wear Western clothes. So
Right. So that's what I'm trying to understand why you're
let's say
saying.
Mennonites and Mennonites.
So Mennonites, the Amish,
Yeah.
the Hasid,
Yeah.
Chabad. Okay.
Then
So
you got
that's model 1.
Model 1. Model 2, the priest has a uniform.
Yes.
The congregation dresses like you can't distinguish them, whether they're atheist or Jew or Catholic or whatever. They dress like mainstream people in society.
Examples.
Catholics,
Catholics. Okay.
right? And then you got model 3, where not only does the congregation have no uniform, but even the clergy, who in most cases is married, doesn't have a uniform either. Protestant Christianity.
Right. Mainline and evangelical Protestants.
Yeah, where the pastor, smells like the sheep. Hopefully not with body odor.
I've never heard that expression, smells like the sheep.
Yeah. I mean, a good pastor smells like the sheep.
Oh, okay. Right. Okay, the story.
So this kid comes, so he's like, oh, please.
No, I want to get to the story, I promise you, but you're putting some good stuff out here. So your contention.
I'm so happy to be on with you guys and on the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
So
Are you kidding? It's amazing.
We're happy to have you here too. It's
I was praying for 2 months, man. Like, Krishna, please let me be pure, as pure as I can be, and let me do the best I can. So
yeah, totally.
You don't need to be that pure to be on this podcast. I think we set the bar pretty. No, I'm just kidding. But I appreciate the sentiment. I want to let you get to the conclusion of that story, so I'm not forgetting it. John, 17-year-old, Laguna Beach, fallen yogi, affluent, upper class, nice kid, right? Clean cut kid. But since you put out those 3 models, I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly and that viewers are hearing us correctly. Your contention then is Mahaprabhu's movement equals...
when he's a grihasta, not when he's a sannyasi, but when he's a grihasta in Navadvip.
In Navadvip, closest to model 3.
Yes.
And therefore, our movement should model ourselves, or we should see as most analogous.
Yes, the
model
grihastas.
3.
The grihastas,
So, yeah. So, right. So the grihastas. And I think that's one place where I think we would disagree. And by the way, I really appreciate that framework. It's a really nice way of thinking of it.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
I would respectfully say, I think our movement historically and contemporaneously is, if I had to choose one, sort of gun to head, because I don't like these comparisons, because I think when you're talking about Abrahamic and non-Abrahamic traditions, there's a lot lost there. But gun to my head, if I had to, I would say model 2, because I think we are a tradition that historically, as well as today, does recognize liturgical roles played by priests, whether ritual priests in the sense of purohits and pujaris.
But by dress?
By dress. And because, and we can talk about whether we think this should be or shouldn't be, but I think, we are a tradition that does embrace, along with householders, that does embrace monasticism, where Mahaprabhu himself took sannyas, and when he did,
that's cool.
Changed his dress.
A vein of monasticism in Gaudiya Vaishnavism is legit, and it's always been there.
No,
always will
so
be.
that's why I say model 2. I think to me makes more sense. Whereas I don't.
But they're minority.
Minority or not, for mainline Protestants, as far as I know, and for evangelicals, there is no monastic category per se.
True.
So and again, I don't want to be like, but I would
make a good point.
For me, I would say, model 2 is maybe.
Can we repeat what model 2 is again?
Model 2 is the priest has a uniform.
Yeah.
And he's a monk.
She, whatever.
That's where I would say, you would probably perhaps say the Orthodox Christians maybe fall more in place, because the Orthodox Christians are allowed to be married and be gurus or priests, whereas the Catholics.
But I think even Episcopalians, I think liturgically are very similar, from what I understand, to Catholics, and would also.
I'm not familiar with the Episcopalians.
They would also, I think, and do.
For the ritual.
They adopt religious garb.
But let me play the devil's advocate. The
Please.
Brahmin in India, whether he's a Shaivite or a Vaishnava or a Smarta or whatever, when he goes on the altar, and let's not talk about, and it's nice you made the distinction at the beginning between, symbols like Vaishnav tilak, or 3 horizontal lines of the Shaivites, or Rudraksha beads as opposed to Tulsi beads.
Right.
But in terms of clothes, the Brahmin, when he goes on the altar to worship the Shiva Lingam or the Vishnu, Radha Krishna or Lakshmi Narayana or whatever, or Hanuman deity, you name it, when he goes on that altar, correct me if I'm wrong, he doesn't wear a religious garb. He wears the same exact clothes on the altar that he wears when he goes to the market to buy vegetables, or hopefully he puts on a new set that's totally clean. As a matter of fact, there's a story in Chaitanya Bhagavat, right, where Lord Chaitanya would cry in ecstasy on his way to his home altar to perform puja, and because his tears touched his clothes, he would go and take a shower, and put on a new set and cry again. And so at the end, he concludes I'm too fallen to worship the deity, right?
Wow.
So cleanliness.
Yes.
But in terms of actual clothes, it's the same clothes. You see a Brahmin in the street in the marketplace or a Brahmin on the altar, there's no uniform.
I would disagree. I think there is a difference. Yeah.
What clothes does a Brahmin wear on the altar that he doesn't wear, in the street or in the marketplace or when he's walking his kids or at home?
In most Hindu traditions, as far as I'm familiar, a Brahmin priest would not wear, for instance, the kind of shirt and pants that I'm wearing now on the altar, but would have absolutely no problem and would wear that, in their sort of personal off the altar time.
But
they do all the time.
That's colonial and post-colonial times. But
that's
before the British come.
Let's bring it home. Let's bring it a little bit more closer to home. That, like for me, for example, and I do pujari seva at the temple, and like on a normal day, I'm just wearing like a shirt and shorts. But when I go to on the altar, I wear I wear pujari clothes.
So are you saying that's an interesting question? I'm sorry to just like the question of what is Vaishnava
but we know what the pujari clothes are.
This is where I feel like, Chandra, why are you making it so hard on yourself, dude?
We could deconstruct all the time. What is American? What is Western? So which I still haven't gotten a definition, by the way. So I challenge.
We didn't even finish the story yet.
Yeah, you want to go to Laguna Beach?
Let's go back to Laguna Beach. But Chandra, I just want to say, like, as a friend, why are you making it so hard on yourself, man? Like, we could agree, but once you start talking about and what about on the altar? It's like.
Didn't Prabhupada establish the, what we should wear on the altar, or even other traditions in Hindu traditions?
What do we do? You're the one who's right at the forefront of religious life at Princeton, so you see firsthand discussions of adjusting according to time, place, and circumstance. It's an interesting question. And the cultural thing comes in too. Like, I thought about this recently, coming closer to the podcast, just as I personally feel a little bit humiliated, culturally speaking, as a white, I'm not putting one race or one ethnicity above the other. I just happen, we believe in karma, whatever. So if our theology is right, I happen to be a soul that's in a white body, born in America from European parents, with a pretty clearly identifiable sartorial culture, product of Christianity for the last 2,000 years. I feel it's humiliating that I have to abandon that and then put on, North Indian, Bengali specifically, dress in order to access God, whether it's through his holy name or through the Murti, even through the Murti, or access God not through the Murti, but access God in service to the Murti or in service to the holy name.
So I think,
and you don't feel that so much, I would say, if I dare speculate, because even though you come from an Indian background, because you come from an Indian background, not even though you're born in America, and so even though you're American by citizenship and stuff, you do have this strong cultural heritage coming from India. So your experience might be different from mine.
Sure, different, but I mean, what I'm hearing you sort of imply in that difference is some kind of privilege
on your behalf,
on my behalf. That somehow, by coming from an Indian background, I don't have to wrestle with the same, and you use a very strong word, humiliation, that you do.
And you may have other ones, which you expressed previously, but the one of having to give up. Please.
Yeah. No, I don't mean to cut you off. Please.
No, I mean to cut you off.
See how respectful we're being. And listen, with whatever little empathy I can muster up in my hardened heart here, because I can lean towards the cynical and the but really, I mean, coming from an empathic place, I think it's completely abhorrent that you or any devotee should have to feel forced in any way to have to feel right. So I think I'm with you there 100%.
You know how difficult it's been
in terms of.
I made the shift. I came out of the closet in 2003, basically.
What that you didn't want to that you didn't want to be forced.
I'm not a monk anymore.
Yeah,
we have a monastic uniform, which actually could perhaps evolve too. Mandali. I don't know where I haven't seen her in a long time, and she's a clothes designer, and she was.
Mandali, yeah.
Remember, she used to be married to Nitai.
Yeah.
So she was talking to Hridayananda some years back about perhaps coming up with a more culturally for a Western mainstream audience, a more culturally appropriate uniform for sannyasis and brahmacharis. But so when I came out of the ashram, I'm no longer a monk.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a monk anymore. I have my own finances, my own independent life. So when I made that choice, it was really hard.
And you know, and on that level, I feel like I do want to make it clear, like on that level, I think it's tragic that you or any devotee should be made to feel less than.
And you know why less?
Particularly for something as, and again, we can maybe agree or disagree on this, but to me, as superficial as dress.
Yeah.
That's, you know, I mean, pardon my French, but that's just like shitty all around, right? Yeah. There's we should do better as a community, as a tradition.
No, but I think what Prabhu's talking, sorry, continue your thought.
Please.
No, but you're talking mostly about like worshiping the deity, giving classes, leading kirtan. That's where it affects people more. And that's what you're talking about, right?
You know how many more classes and I mean, you know, I'm not qualified and I'm fallen. I believe it. I know it, but in all objectivity, it's so obvious. I would have given a lot more classes.
So you're saying I have stuff to give. I have contributions to make, and I am not able to make them because I'm getting shut down because of what I'm wearing.
Yeah, in Los Angeles, for New Dwarka, Swavas, heads up, you know, heads up. What's it called? A shout out to you.
Yeah.
You know, and recently I was there actually, and times are changing. Like for example, a few weeks ago I was there in L.A. Showed up for Mangal Artik. There's no bathroom, by the way. Like, have you heard of a church that has a service going on and there's no bathroom to go to for the congregation members? So I show up.
Which, by the way, is a beautiful example of conversations that I would like to have that have zero to do with Indian, Western, or any other ethnic.
True.
Right?
Yeah, you're right.
Like, there should be basic hospitality.
It does have to do with artificial renunciation. Because when you renounce, again, why have we not been able to create even small congregations of, you know, whites, blacks? We have, but they're so small.
But Chandrasekhara, like the lack of a bathroom, I'm telling you honestly, as a brown person, it bothers me just as much as a white person. And
we'd hope it would.
So I mean, like, you know, where again,
I'm saying it's false renunciation. So, you know, I applied to dress code.
I love the false renunciation. The jump right into like the Indian Western divide again. We
went off topic here.
Yeah.
But just to say, like, just to express in a given example of my you know, experience. Mm-hmm. So in LA, it was, and I knew like there's no way I'm going to lead any kirtan. Because it's very clear. Suvas, the temple president, you know, for centuries says a Paul, you know, unless you're wearing that dhoti and that kurta, you are not leading a Mangal Artik. You are not leading a Guru Puja. You are not leading a Tulsi Arti. Doesn't matter how much money you collected or, anyway, I don't want to get into that. But, and so I was just standing there right after Mangal Artik, and two devotees were like, hey, lead Tulsi Arti. And I was like, oh, no way. And they were like, so they pushed me literally like pushed me to the mic. And then so I was like literally no.
Because of the way you're dressed.
Yeah. And I was, you know, just like this, basically, like trying to dress like Prabhupada in several occasions says, like a gentleman.
Right.
And I hope I can be a gentleman one day, but at least dress like one, right? Fake it until you make it. But I could see like, and the devotees who asked me chuckled afterwards, you know, like, okay, whatever, it's for us, you know.
Yeah.
That would have never happened 10, 15 years ago. Should we go back to Laguna Beach?
We should.
Okay.
And I feel like we always start. And then
we're keeping some audience retention here, but the Laguna Beach story.
So on the empathy,
because Laguna Beach is an example. Yeah, please. Yeah. But it's an example.
Finish your thought and then go to Laguna Beach.
It's an example of how I think dress does have a very big effect on the statistics.
Yeah.
The demographic statistics. Please, empathy.
Empathy, and more empathy for just what sounds like terrible, you know, dare I even say traumatic experiences, right? And respectfully, I don't want to re-traumatize you, but respectfully, I feel like to go from that to this simplified sort of Indian category, Western category, I feel like is a misstep. I feel like it's not having, to me, the much more important conversations around false renunciation, around monasticism and what it means to be a householder and what it means to be integrated and all of that. And again, at the risk of, coming off like a little bit of a jerk here, when you signed up for Krishna consciousness, you knew this was a tradition that was, at least historically, we can talk about spiritually, transcendent, whatever, but you're an academic, you have the academic training.
Well, I went back to academia 15 years
But,
after.
but as you sit here, I mean, I hope we could agree that through a historical lens, this is a tradition that's rooted in ancient India, and more specifically in terms of Mahaprabhu's movement in a very culturally specific. But Mahaprabhu wasn't,
Mahaprabhu dressed like everybody else in Navadvip.
But Prabhu, the tradition is from India. So when you signed up for this tradition,
but what
you knew you were going to engage with Indian culture on some level, right? So to go to use
so
a
are you
strong
saying
word,
so you're saying the mission of ISKCON is to promulgate Indian culture?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
What I'm saying is,
But then because you're saying implied in my words, but implied in your words is that, hey, if you're not happy with...
Prabhu, what I'm saying is, to use a strong word like feeling humiliated and forced to give up your culture, I'm not saying anyone should be forced to give up their culture, should be forced to give up how they feel comfortable dressing. At the same time, Prabhu, and at the same time, right, you knew that there was going to be some cultural negotiation at play, right? You are
20 years old.
Prabhu, you converted to I don't even like the word conversion.
No, we can use that
But you
word.
converted to a tradition that's rooted in India, that's a recent transplant.
And so what's your point?
Well, yeah. What's the point?
My point is there's complexity that you have to negotiate.
Okay, and? Don't complain, don't try to change it, sit in the back of the bus.
Negotiate it thoughtfully, and don't just flip back on a binary that then turns around and tries to make a whole other group of people a scapegoat.
That binary works. I think that binary is solid.
That works if you're a white dude, but it doesn't work for the people you're now scapegoating.
Unpack that.
You're using a binary that, as far as I've heard from you, and as far as I've heard from others presenting this sort of vision.
You're not getting much of a talk in this.
No, this is great. I love hearing you both go at it here.
The way I'm hearing it, you're essentially scapegoating the lack of growth on the part of ISKCON towards this phenomenon of Indianization or Hinduization.
Well, can I give you evidence?
Absolutely, if you have evidence to give.
Laguna Beach being one, and visual stuff that you can see. Today, if you go around ISKCON in the Western world, it's glaring like the midday sun. And what about?
Well, I'm not arguing that they're not that there hasn't been a demographic shift or there's not large numbers of Indians and Indian Americans
connected to dress.
Connected to dress.
Yeah.
Please.
You challenge that.
Yeah, please.
I don't.
Please provide.
I don't. Well, I think it's a good segue to go to the Laguna Beach.
Okay, yeah.
Because that guy, that John, to me represents that that one grain of rice that if you touch it and if it's cooked or not, it represents a lot of grains of rice in that same pot.
Yeah.
Right. So he asks me. So we're back in Laguna Beach. This guy asks me, so what do you guys believe in? After he's told me I'm happy being a Christian, and so in a few minutes I summarize what I thought were the essential beliefs we have and our essential practice. And as I'm talking, more and more devotees are coming into the temple. Some dressed in traditional Indian clothes, some dressed in mainstream Western clothes. And he says, so what's up with the dress? So I told him, well, in our church, there seems to be two opinions. One group of people think that it's an important, that, this traditional way to dress is an important component of the tradition. It pleases God, it's more pleasing to God, and therefore, we should dress like that. Another group of people claim that style of dress was a staple way of dressing in South Asia, specifically in India, shared by many different schools. I mean, it's a fact that Vaishnavas are a minority who wear dhoti and saris. And that therefore, because one tradition now has been transplanted into American soil, we should adapt, and we're the equivalent of, modest, clean, staple clothes of that local culture. And he said this. And when he said this, I was just like, and this was like 10, 15 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, wow. if I had to dress like Jesus Christ dressed 2,000 years ago in order to be a member of my church today, I would never be a member of my church. I was in Michigan last week at the house of a friend of mine who's an Orthodox priest. He has a 12-year-old son. He was a brahmachari for a few years in New Vrindavan during the crazy days of Hridayananda. He tapped out and became an Orthodox priest, been a priest for 20 plus years. And he told me when I arrived, I spent a week there. I love, he's a friend, and, he's got 2,000 years of Christian ministry behind him, an experience, an inherited
Congregational development
of 2,000 years and centuries in America. So his view as a total well-wisher and even, somewhat insider of ISKCON is really beneficial for my development. And it's pure soul too, I think. So he told me, when I told my son that you're coming, my 12-year-old son asked me, does he wear those weird robes? And I told my son, no, don't worry, he's normal. Don't blame the messenger here. I'm just repeating what my friend said. And his son said, okay, thank God. Why should he? 12-year-old kid, right? A 12-year-old kid. I have a friend in Russia who told me that sometimes you have these old sort of grandma type ladies, babushkas they call them, and they'll walk up to devotees who are doing Harinam in dhotis, and it's -10. And what's the message? It's not like, hey, hear these divine names of God. It's, oh my God, he's so cold. And she comes and gives him a few rubles and says, my dear boy, please go buy yourself some warm clothes. So in terms of statistics, as I said, I travel a lot and I see it. Like if you go, for example, to the temple in Wellington, New Zealand, and then you go to the loft programs of Devamrita Swami, where that many of Devamrita Swami's followers organize. You look at the demographics, very visible. You go to Tawako, or you go to the Bhakti Center, where the leaders at the Bhakti Center, the Grihastha leaders, do dress in Western clothes when they give class, when they lead kirtans. Kaustubha Prabhu last year at Rath Yatra, or 2 years ago at Rath Yatra, he gave a class on the roof of the Bhakti Center, on the separate feelings of separation from the gopis, super esoteric stuff. He was wearing clean jeans, a V-style T-shirt, and the audience had a lot. The audience resembled a lot more the demographics of this country, where it's 60% whites, 3 times less Hispanics, so 20% Hispanics. And then I think there's like 12% blacks. Then there's like 6% Asians, and out of 6% Asians, it's like a total of like 4 million Indians. And so in the audience, there were basically that percentage equivalent of whites, of Indians, of blacks, of Latinos. And the speaker is dressed in mainstream Western clothes. Go to Paris. You go to the Paris temple in Noisy-le-Grand, in Sarcelles. You basically go to Dhaka. Like you don't have to fly to Bangladesh. You just go to the Sunday feast program there. And the leaders there, the Grihastha leaders, well-meaning as they are dressed in Indian clothes. You go to the Yoga Lyrique little preaching center, which is kind of like the equivalent of the 22nd Avenue, where the Grihastha devotees there are dressed in mainstream Western clothes.
Yeah.
There's a lot more whites and North Africans than at the temple. New Dwarka on a Sunday. All Indians, and again, that's not a problem. I hear you, and I do criticize those who say that Indians is a problem. It's not. Souls in Indian bodies coming to Mahaprabhu is glorious. It's glorious for them. It's glorious for planet Earth. It's glorious for the Yuga Dharma. I'm talking about the 98.7% remainder of American society, right? And then you go to the mantra house just 3 blocks up at Veda Yoga by Kumi, where again, the householder giving a class is in nice clean pants, whether, in jeans or in khakis.
Yeah.
And same thing, you see a lot of whites, you see a good number of blacks, you see a good number of Indians, you can see all over the place.
So you
see that all over Brisbane,
Yeah.
Australia, New Govardhan. So I think at least I see it where the householders dress in Western clothes.
Yeah.
The demographics are it's glaring.
And I don't disagree with you. as the old adage goes, though, correlation does not equal causation. And so what my understanding, and in my experience, sort of on the front lines as well, maybe we're on the front lines in different ways, but
You're definitely on the front line.
through my own
So lucky
sort
to
of
have that
lived
position.
experience, and I mean both professionally, but also within ISKCON. You mentioned the Bhakti Center. I mean, I was on the board of the directors of Bhakti Center, and while I'm not currently, it's still a project that's very dear to my heart, and I'm very involved in, sort of from the inside out. So, I mean, we could talk about the sort of the mood of the Bhakti Center as well. But in my experience, all of those examples that you named, there is a correlation for sure. But what I would say is,
Oh, we got to talk about the shika.
the
shika, you buzzed up just for the.
No. Summer I do.
But and
Why should grihastas wear a shika? I'd love to ask you that question.
I would love to get there. Let's actually get there, because
How long do we have?
But we've got all the time in the world.
Yeah, we have another hour and 15.
We'll cut this into 7 episodes if we. No, I'm just kidding. But I love this stuff.
That's
I
a
love
good question. Like, let me throw that out. Like, in America, why? And let me just throw it out.
Yeah, throw it
why
out.
should a householder who's in the world, who's a world embracing, to quote Garuda Prabhu, he comes up with these amazing, phrases, right? Like polymorphic bimonotheism, or a world embracing Vaishnava as opposed to a world renouncing negating, right? So if you're a household, you're a world embracing.
Yeah.
Why are you and the shika, I claim, and I haven't seen any evidence that the shika is an exclusive Vaishnava symbol. It's worn by all sorts of Brahmins who, in many, many cases, in the majority case, have nothing to do with Vaishnavism. So in America, where we don't have to, suck up or impress the Brahmin caste, as the Vaishnavas did have to do at the time following Mahaprabhu, and hence the Hari Bhakti Vilas that came into being. We also have, authority. That's non-existent here. Why should a householder in America, I mean, he can dress in whichever way he wants, but why wear a little ponytail that doesn't even represent exclusive Vaishnavism? But please continue.
Yeah. So and let's put that on the table, because that is part of the conversation that I would really.
These young boys and young boys raised in the movement, and it's like, and they think that that's a symbol of Vaishnavism, and it's like, no, it's not. You want to die on the hill with some Vaishnava symbol? Okay, tattoo tilak on your forehead. Wear huge tulsi beads. I won't say a word. But your Indian clothes and your shika, how is that a Vaishnava thing? But please go on.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Maybe we should ask me, because I'm a grihasta and I have a shika.
Yeah, and that's why I don't know. We should take a vote. But Namras's previous
your logo. He
logo.
found my logo.
Violent.
Yeah,
Violent.
The violent shika. In the sense of
Great name for a band, by the way. Put that on my list. The Violent Shikas.
Violent shikas. Yeah.
Good band. It's really corny.
But just going back to this correlation and causation thing, if we had the time, what I would love to do is I would love to unpack all those examples and anecdotally
deconstruct all
and
of them.
deconstruct.
You're too much in that deconstruction.
No, listen.
You plant this stuff, Chandra, and then you're not happy when someone wants to poke at it.
No, you poke at it.
So let me poke at it.
I recognize.
Let me poke at it. No, let me poke at it.
The methodology is very much in the line of the deconstructionist.
Chandra, come on,
Foucault, Derrida. Let's deconstruct any sort of structure of
Chandra.
What?
You're just going to dismiss what I'm saying by accusing me of being like Foucault or something? Come on. You went through academia too, like.
Yeah, but and I think it's I think it's just unnecessary deconstructionism.
Yeah.
Just like, what is a woman? Although we can go down that rabbit hole forever. Some people say, well, look, 2x.
Chandra, if you're going to use a term, you should be ready to define the term.
I am. So I'm just telling you what I perceive in your.
All I'm doing is asking you to define terms. That's all. So when I say what is a Westerner, I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm not trying to be snarky. I'm trying to say, in a world right now.
So a Westerner is someone born in the West. You look at a map.
So I'm a Westerner.
I'm a Westerner.
You're a Westerner.
He's a Westerner.
I think, especially according to our scriptures, Praja means someone who was born in a particular tract of land.
Yeah.
So you were born in America. You guys are Westerners.
That's all I've. When I ask that question,
how difficult is that definition? American. What is American?
It's not difficult. But then how easily
and mainstream American dress. How difficult is that to define? Take 333 million people. Look at how they dress. Take the most common denominator. You've got your mainstream American way of dressing.
Chandra, I'm not arguing that.
Shut up. please.
I'm not arguing that at all. When I asked for a definition of Westerner, anyway, we're getting far afield. But my point is, when I asked for the definition, is give me a definition that allows me to understand.
A definition of what?
Of Westerner.
Okay.
And this is going back to the previous podcast, but I'm asking sincerely, I'm not trying to like deconstruct for the sake of deconstructing. I'm saying, give me a definition that I can see myself and my kids in, and I can understand, because when I hear people talk about Westerners and Indians in the context of ISKCON in America, that's confusing for me. And if you think I'm maybe a simpleton for being confused by that,
No.
well, you know, I have a hyphenated identity. I'm the child of immigrants. I'm an Indian American.
Right.
I personally struggle when I hear folks, even folks who I want to give the benefit of the doubt to, but who it feels like are dividing my community up into what can sometimes feel like very arbitrary categories.
But even the Indian community, like I notice we don't really challenge that term. There's 19,000 dialects in India. So, let's deconstruct what it means to be an Indian.
Well,
I mean, that really is a.
I would love to, but then you're gonna accuse me of being a wanton deconstructor or whatever.
No, but I see a little bit of a bias. Like we have no issue with the category Indian.
I have 100% issue with the category Indian.
Okay.
My whole point here, which hopefully we can get into, because I feel like maybe we're just like spiraling a little bit. But my whole point is, we can do better than those categories. We can have a really interesting conversation about dress, about shikas, about dhotis, about monasticism and grihastas. Like, that's a good conversation. That's a conversation that I don't hear happening too much.
But who wears dhotis and kurtas?
Who wears dhotis and kurtas in ISKCON?
In the world. The large majority of people who wear dhotis and kurtas, who are they?
Bro, if you spend any time with people my age or even younger, there are not a whole lot of brown kids wearing dhotis and kurtas. Let me tell you that.
On planet Earth, let's look at majority. Why are we looking for exceptions always? That's why
My point is. Let's look at. If you want to have a conversation about, it's almost like I want to help you in what you're saying, because I actually think when you talk about monastic dress and you talk about grihasta dress and you talk about householders integrating with society and embracing the world, I feel like that's a really thoughtful conversation to have. And then I feel like you lose me and you lose others when you jump right into ethnicity and race. We don't need here's my I want to put this out there. I don't want to call it a challenge, but I want to make a little bit of a bold statement here, that we can have a meaningful conversation about these topics without relying on problematic categories.
Okay, we'll still be
that are rooted in ethnicity.
Pants and shirt versus.
We can still talk about pants and shirt. If you want to talk about pants and shirts and dhotis,
we're talking dress.
100%. Let's talk about it, but let's talk about it for the right reasons. Well, let's talk about it for the reasons.
For the reason I talk about it for the sake of saving America and the majority of souls in different bodies in this country. That's what I'm talking about. Because a lot of times, Chandra, why are you talking about this? It's not important.
What I'm saying is, let's talk about it then in the context of ISKCON's relationship with monasticism, ISKCON's self-understanding of devotees, grihasta devotees. That to me.
So go.
So you agree with what he's saying?
That's the thing. I mean, I'm sorry if I sound a little frustrated, but one of the things that really kind of gets me is, and I wonder if some viewers watching this right now are assuming that I actually disagree with you when I don't. When it comes to
you agree.
When Madhu, you remember Madan Gopal?
Yeah.
So he was on the podcast and he quoted that famous statement that Prabhupada made when he went to Nairobi, and
right, he didn't see any Africans there,
and he said, "Did I come to Africa to preach to the Indians?" Prabhupada, his own statement. I had heard it several times from Bhakti Charu Swami when I traveled with him, and here Madan Gopal Prabhu was repeating it. I remember, and then not to put you on the spot, but then you kind of, and I think you were playing the devil's advocate, but you kind of you went, well, what's the problem if Prabhupada maybe said that in time, place, and circumstance? What is the problem if ISKCON today attracts mostly Indians? And he was like, I don't think so. That's
what I said in that context is two things. One, my understanding that statement, which I think you would agree with, and I think I've heard you articulate this, and I appreciate it, was that we can understand Prabhupada's statement as, I didn't come here just for Indians,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, I didn't.
So
Obviously, he wants to preach there.
So I
but-
appreciate that.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, I believe that the point that I made in that podcast with Madan Gopal Prabhu is, I have genuine curiosity around if Prabhupada were with us today, given the sort of waves of immigration in terms of the vibrant Indian American communities in places like New Jersey, for instance, where we're sitting right now, I have genuine curiosity around how Prabhupada would approach that. Would he do everything exactly the same way as he did in 1976 or whatever?
If you told Prabhupada, it's an empirical fact that wherever there's black or even Indian Prabhus too, because there's a lot of, I have a few Indian-bodied friends who consciously never wear a dhoti in the West. Like there's a friend of mine, Bharat, in New Govardhan, born in India, and he's like extreme, in that regard. So if we told Prabhupada today, Prabhupada, it seems from what we see with our own imperfect senses, it seems to correlate with, studies on the history of conversions when, Catholics go to Mexico or when Catholics go to China, there's, they're always adjusting, the cultural thing so that, again, group A and group B have less cultural differences.
Sure.
Can householders lead kirtans in pants and shirt? Can they lead, give Bhagavatam class? He would probably say, I already allow that. Mukunda Maharaj, what's the devotee's name? He wrote a Bhagavad Gita. He's a British.
Ranchor. Prabhu.
Yes, Ranchor told me personally that he's, Mukunda Maharaj at the time married would come to the Soho temple the Bury Place temple on his way to work. He had a job for some time and he would give Bhagavatam class in pants and shirt, and they asked Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, "Yes, of course."
I don't disagree.
Isn't it according to like just the local temple authorities, like what their preference is?
Yes and no. It's a good question, but like, if yes and no, and they say yes because it's your, you're the lead, you're the head pastor. You kind of set the tone, the ethos. No, because there's certain standards that Prabhupada set up. That's why I kind of disagree with Hridayananda Maharaj, for example, where he often said like, the old established temples, leave them alone, like don't try to change things. And I'm like, no.
You want to see the old established temples change things.
At least allow for householders not to have to, and I'm not going to say humiliate themselves on the basis of culture. So you'll be happy, I think, with this, to humiliate themselves on the basis of ashram even.
Again, that's a more interesting conversation.
Okay, so let's go with that. So a householder,
yeah.
Think about it. In Alatra, you've got a few brahmacharis living. I'm happy we're going forward in a nice way. I mean, it's already been nice. But in Alatra, for example, you've got a few brahmacharis living there. When they give class, they can just come out of their brahmachari ashram, sit on the Vyasasana, give a talk. A householder who has a job, most of them do. Prabhupada was, proud of his, he wanted that. And we see like professionals like you who are able to wonderfully juggle or, balance the way, what does the Sri Upanishad say about, one who can cultivate
culture of nescience and the culture.
Of transcendental knowledge side by side. So that's why you guys are wonderful. And I'm not saying this to maybe just a little bit to kiss your ass, but not too much. But you're a wonderful example.
He wants me to be nicer to him. He's like,
no,
stop being such a dick.
You're great examples, paving the way for future householders who are precisely able to balance both. But so you have a householder who has a job in Gainesville, for example. He's a good class giver. He taught Bhakti Shastri, but he's got to be, so imagine how humiliating it is for him because he's got to show up at the temple with a little backpack with his dhoti and kurta. Excuse me, where's the changing room? Like he's got to take off his pants, put on his dhoti. That's humiliating, and that's why it's like householders like, okay, if it's not for an issue of ethnicity or culture, at least in terms of ashram, like why this discrimination against householders? It's much more user friendly for a brahmachari or sannyasi to lead kirtans or to householder.
See,
I get your point.
So I want to get there, and maybe this is a segue into it because I do want to complete that thought on correlation and causation. And I don't know all of the centers that you mentioned when you were sort of going through these different examples of places where you could sort of see a demographic difference, right?
I mean, it's clear. Really, believe me, I'm
not,
biased, but here I'm not really talking about
I'm not disagreeing with you necessarily in terms of what you observed. Where I would like to complicate things is I would like to say, particularly in some projects that I'm familiar with, like for instance the Bhakti Center, that I think it would be a mistake or an overreach or an oversimplification to ascribe the policies, to ascribe that success with the non-Indian demographic to policies around dress. The policies around dress, I think, reflect a larger sort of ethos in those centers. And those are the conversations that I want to have. And one of my frustrations when we get, forgive me here, and I'm, I don't mean this as a dig at you, but when we get so hung up on on the issue of just dress, it's like, well, what about the 9 other conversations, right? You're talking about one aspect, Kaustubha Prabhu giving class, in jeans. I mean, I myself, not that I'm necessarily a great class giver, but I give class at the Bhakti Center. Most of the time, I'm also wearing similar clothes to what I'm wearing now. It's never been an issue. It's never been raised, right? But I think it would be like such an oversimplification, such a loss to say, oh, look, like the Bhakti Center's success is due to the fact that, these folks are given the freedom to wear, quote unquote, Western or secular clothes, right? There's so many other factors.
But I'm not denying that.
And the clothes are not just one factor, but I would say they're in some ways, they're the sort of tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
I want to say something.
So I want to have those conversations about those deeper things.
We have to agree to disagree. I think that the clothes thing is a lot more, is a bigger factor than you think.
I'm telling you, at least in the example of the Bhakti Center, because that is my home temple, I can tell you the clothes thing, it is, I don't want to say a non-issue, but it's such a small issue. I can't even recall a time it was discussed. It's just part of the ethos. In other words,
which is wonderful.
Yeah. And I would love to see more like that too. So again, I think we're on the same side when it comes to that. I think we're seeing differently how much weight to give to the clothing piece of it.
I think that a part of the conversation, like in, for example, North America or wherever you see that Krishna consciousness is not spreading in the way that or growing in the way we want it to, the part of the conversation that never comes up is the spiritual advancement part. Like, the reason Srila Prabhupada's whole explosion of Krishna consciousness happened because of his pure chanting of the holy name in Tompkins Square Park. Whatever clothes he was wearing, pants or whatever the people were getting attracted. So I think that the big conversation should be around how advanced are the devotees in America, for example, to be able to affect people in advancing and spreading Krishna consciousness. Not that it all has to do with some external things.
Okay. Are you questioning the purity of the?
Yeah, I am.
Because we do have, our growth.
We have pure devotees for sure. We have pure devotees.
Not very large. So you're questioning the purity of, a majority of the living devotees, members of ISKCON today.
Yes.
I don't.
You don't think that? You don't think that?
I don't think we're
spiritual purity. Spiritual purity has to do with. Yeah.
The principle is there, but it's not an automatic thing.
Yeah, it says
thing.
Krishna Shakti. Yeah, it says, it doesn't say anything about dress
Krishna
Shakti.
does,
Dress Shakti is how
but then
Krishna
again,
consciousness should.
Again, Prabhupada, first dress and a dress. Right.
So
why would Narottam Das Thakur, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, as a matter of fact, there's this really cool quote, which I don't have here because I wasn't able to print that thing. But
you have it on your phone?
Bhakti Siddhanta, Saraswati Thakur in Dushtamana has these wonderful quotes about Falgu Vairagya, and he compares language to clothes, right? So, here, let me read one to you. This is really cool. The thing that a devotee uses in relation to Lord Krishna are objects belonging directly to the transcendental realm. On the other hand, one who engages in chanting the Lord's name with hopes of enhancing his own material reputation finds that all his activities and paraphernalia represent only the riches of hypocrisy. One who falsely gives up things that could actually be used in the Lord's service proudly calls himself a renunciate, which could also apply to, a bona fide householder. But unfortunately, he can never become a Vaishnava by such an attitude. I don't think the householders or devotees in general in America today are lacking purity. I don't think they're considerably less pure in consciousness and in their bhakti and in their devotion to God than Prabhupada disciples were in the 70s. I refuse to accept that.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what I'm saying.
oh, okay, I'm sorry.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we feel like there's some equation that's like bead bag, tilak, sika, dhoti. It's not about any of that.
You feel like we're trying to tweak that stuff rather than work on the spiritual
work on
advancement
the
part?
like becoming spiritually advanced, no matter what clothes we're wearing.
Can I throw like because I it's funny. It's like I actually find myself sort of somewhere in between the two of you on this one, because I think I kind of feel where you're coming from, and at the same time I agree with Chandra. I don't think there's a lack of purity, and I don't think there's even a lack of focus on spiritual advancement. Where I would throw a sort of a wrinkle into this is, I think we collectively could do a lot more reflection on how to be relatable, relevant, and accessible.
Can I say
to
something
others.
here? I love
And I think
the
dress is
principle.
part of it. I think food is part of it. But I
Brings
think
me
there's a
back to-
lot of other stuff that's a part of it.
Granted.
And I don't think, and here's where, again, we may agree to disagree, but I don't think that ethnic categories are the way to
Okay.
go to have that
Let's
conversation.
leave that. They're good. Maybe I'll never speak of ethnic categories again. At least
No.
but
Talk about
ethnic
whatever you want
categories
to
in terms
talk
of, I mean, the demographics are there. Like the ethnic categories in terms of census data of the United States of America are always going to be there. These are realities,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that it has nothing.
Okay.
Krishna conscious
Gotcha.
spreading has nothing to do with that, in my eyes.
Kalakanta Prabhu was you sent, you posted a short.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we did an episode with him. I don't know.
Right?
I don't think it's
and he
it's aired
often, and
yet,
again,
has it?
all due respect to Kalakanta Prabhu, I think he's a bona fide spiritual master. So, if any of his disciples are hearing this, like, your guru's great.
But
But he's not great. No, but
I wish he wore pants.
yeah, or at least he didn't have this, what I call, and it's not directed to him, but I call this, and I call it sartorial schizophrenia.
In other words, I'm a grasta and I dress like a sannyasi.
No, yeah,
Or a monastic.
or I have two wardrobes. Schizophrenics have two, double personality. I mean, it's not funny. That's what we hear.
I wear this to the...
Yeah, I have two wardrobes. We talk about simple living, high thinking. I was just in Atlanta. There's this new bhakta, which Vedasar Prabhu calls Balaram. It's a nickname. So his name is Balaram. Real nice guy, well-educated. He stays in that house, next to the temple. Mm-hmm. And when I told him, he's like, yeah, I have two wardrobes. I have, my devotional clothes, Dodi's Kurta, sorry. Raghunath from Wisdom of the Sages, he's like, devotional clothes means whatever clothes I use to serve Krishna, that's devotional clothes.
Sure.
So he says, I have these two wardrobes. I have my, the clothes I wear to the temple, and then, the other clothes. By the way, the term karmi clothes, is a term that Prabhupada disciples came up with. Prabhupada never came up with that term. And so, yeah, this sartorial dress related, sartorial schizophrenia, where, Kalakanta Prabhu will show up at Mangal Arti in his dhoti and kurta, and then, go hide somewhere, because you're not going to take off your dhoti and put on pants in the middle of the temple. So, but literally, he has to go through the trouble of going to some place which is off limits to a lot of visiting devotees. So you see also, again, the discrimination in a way for the temple devotees and those who are visiting who don't have access to. But then you get these crazy things, like in Ukraine, for example. In a lot of temples in Ukraine, there's like changing rooms where congregational members show up. And again, it's -10 outside or something. They'll show up with a backpack, and
So that they can go and change into their devotee clothes at the temple.
and standing on chairs and stuff, because there's melted, snow on the floors, and they got a 2-meter long dhoti that they have to put on just so they can go to the temple room, feel part of the community, chant Hare Krishna for a few minutes, honor some prasadam, and go back to the I think that's
What if they
madness.
want to do that though?
What if I want to, whatever. I mean, yeah, that's their free will. It's just, is that a good tactic for spreading Krishna consciousness?
So
and what's the nonverbal message? What's a nonverbal message?
That's an interesting distinction, right? Because I think there's a question of what people should be able to do, right? And so
yeah, Kalakanta. Let me just
Oh,
finish.
yeah.
Kalakanta
Okay.
Prabhu. So he was, in that clip, he's like, we have to be very concerned, we're very sensitive to, because echoing your statement, we have to be really concerned about, how people feel around us, other people, the general population around us. We can't burn people out. We have to be.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, wait, there's an elephant in the room here. Like, Kalakanta Prabhu was saying this. He's a householder with a bald head and a shika. one could question why. Is again, he can do whatever he wants, but like
He's from a certain generation.
okay, but and
Yeah, so
then
there's a generational thing at
he's
play here
wearing
too.
a Middle Eastern kurta. You don't see, again, like mainstream. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying you take 333 million Americans and you look at the common denominator of how they dress. I think it'd be wise for householders to, regardless of ethnicity, fit in that basic mainstream precisely as Hridayananda aptly says, so you could be at equidistance as a preacher, as a cleric, as a chaplain, as a priest, as a pastor, as a spiritual leader. You could be at equidistance of all the sort of more marginalized groups who may wear Gothic clothes or punk clothes or traditional Indian clothes or the Sikhs, But if you're kind of in that if you're situated in that mainstream, you're at equidistance. You can help all the different communities. What to speak of, the ones that are right next to you in the large mainstream circle in between. Right. So there's an elephant in the room. Like, why don't you dress like a normal American, mainstream normal American? Look, I have a conviction. And you made a thing. I have a conviction. I may be wrong. I don't know the future. My senses are imperfect. Vaisheshika, for example, I think he's a great soul. I mean, his example of Shravanam Kirtanam is through the roof. His attachment to the Bhagavatam, wow, right? If he and Kalakanta and Mahatma Prabhu and, all these leading Grihastha disciples had 30, 40 years ago grown out their hair, cut off their shika, worn nice gentlemanly dress like you're wearing, and continued with the same.
He
looked at me.
He looked at Don and he's like, shit, that's not going to work. And then he goes to the he's like, yeah, I approve.
Man, the Kurta Kichai.
No, please go on.
No, continue. You're talking.
And was dressed as a normal mainstream American. Again, like, what does it mean to me? I'm just talking like majority here, right? Regardless of ethnicity, I believe they would have way, 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 way more disciples from outside of the Indian diaspora who deserve great souls like they. And they also deserve, devotees, or coming up and coming devotees or souls who outside of the Indian diaspora. So it's like a loss for everybody. And coming back to Falgu Vairagya.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I appreciate the point. I'm not sure if I
Oh, look at Kaustubha and Raghunath. Again, there's just the analytics are out there. Again,
Raghunath wears a yellow dhoti now.
in India.
No, he wears it here.
see that's where Chandra. That's where I gotta again say you're sort of.
No, but don't oversimplify. Maybe but don't negate the whole thing either.
I'm not
Okay, you're just saying a little bit oversimplifying.
What I'm saying,
okay, I get you.
due
But let's
respect-
move on.
Let's not cherry pick. Let's not say let's not take the aspects of Kaustubha and Raghunath. If you're gonna name them, right?
We're naming a lot of people in this
If you're
podcast.
gonna name Kaustubha and Raghunath, take the whole Kaustubha and the whole Raghunath. Don't just cherry pick the times that you like.
why not?
Ask them what they represent. Ask them how they feel about this.
I do. Why did Kaustubha dress in pants? At the Rath Yatra lecture.
Why does Kaustubha also wear a dhoti? Right? I'm not again. My point is not to defend or to condemn. My point is just if you're gonna do it, take the whole picture.
I understand.
Don't just cherry pick the example.
I understand your point, and it's a good point, but it the abstractness of where you're going with that's where I get lost. Like, okay, we should have grihasthas.
I mean, do you
wearing...
agree in the principle that we spoke about at the very beginning, which I didn't come up with? This principle, you got group A, community A, community
No,
B.
that was great. I love that.
So that's like,
So
do we agree with that? Do you agree with that? I mean, this is like scholars.
With nuance.
Well, no, of course.
With nuance.
Of course.
Of course. Deconstruction time. You ready? Put on your
Go on.
Let's put on your hard hat. We're going to deconstruct. Okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to offer you like a hypothetical, and let's take it out of the context of ISKCON just to make it sort of to take out the emotional punch, and let's just look at it from a distance. We'll give a hypothetical. Let's just say, a Zen Buddhist organization.
I think it's a bad example because they're only monks.
Nope, that's not true.
Or
There are plenty of lay.
Do you want more water?
Zen.
Oh, thank you.
Should we break and you want to take?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead. Sorry. A Zen organization.
A Zen organization. I mean, I specifically gave the example because it is an organization that has both monastics and lay. Okay. I get invited to I'm interested in spirituality, philosophy, meditation, mindfulness, whatever. I'm a seeker, blah, blah,
I'd
blah.
love to talk about the Shika soon before
Sure,
we
yeah.
end.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll get there. So in this hypothetical, I'm all those things, and someone says, hey, you should check out this Zen Buddhist, temple, center, whatever. I go, I show up at their open house, and the vast majority of people I see are all Japanese. The vast majority of people I see are wearing very traditional Japanese garb, wearing the kimonos. Their language is full of sort of Japanese terms and other terms that seem to be very like jargony that I have no idea what they're talking about. No one's stopping to explain that stuff to me. The food that's served, I don't know what it is. It's not labeled. No one is able to tell me what's in it. It's very sort of a very foreign experience to me. I'm likely to walk away from that experience, maybe with some appreciation for whatever spirituality and whatever feeling I could get, but probably concluding that this is not really the place for me, right? And I think that would be a pretty, if I'm understanding correctly, I think this would be kind of an apt sort of analog to your critique of many, if not most, ISKCON spaces that sort of feel ethnically dissonant from the average non-Indian person who's not of Indian origin. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's tweak the example a little bit. Let's say I go, same thing, interested, seeking. I go to a Zen Buddhist center that has roots in Japan. And now, in this example, I can't really even see it. There's like no Japanese people there. The only sort of hint at anything Japanese is, like a framed picture of, T.D. Suzuki or some Zen master. But otherwise, everything else is pretty like culturally devoid of any connection to the roots of this tradition. The food that's served is completely just, American fare, whatever. I may also experience some spirituality there. I'm also kind of likely to walk away from that experience and kind of wonder, like, this is a little strange. Like, why is this tradition that's rooted in a certain culture and a certain community, like what gives? Is this like an Americanized cult version of this tradition, right? So, again, imperfect analogy, but I see both of those as sort of extremes, both of those as kind of like the sides where the pendulum is swinging. I don't see why it's so difficult to find a happy medium, a medium that acknowledges the cultural and historical roots of a tradition, but also is accessible, is relevant, is welcoming, is diverse in terms of its, right? Would you agree that that's sort of ultimately what that's the win-win
A house in which
sort
the
of
whole world can live, right?
Sure. And one
That's certainly not the case today.
But why swing the pendulum all the way to the other side? Why not really try to find and not just find, but create a community that is reflective of diversity, of the intermingling of cultural expressions?
And yet with dress, you can't be neutral. That's the thing. Like, your body language is always saying something, even if you're naked, like, you're saying something,
sure,
right?
which I think brings us really nicely to what I hear you saying and what I actually really resonate with, which is in our tradition, and even I would dare to say theologically for us, dress does express something, and what it expresses.
Now we have to really, the imitatio Krishna argument, perhaps. It triggers remembrance of Radha Krishna.
No, that's not where I'm going. Although that's an interesting topic.
It is an interesting.
It's not necessarily one that I'm
perhaps
particularly.
argument.
Yeah, it's not my wheelhouse and not what I'm into. But sure, that argument can be made. Where I'm going is what I think, and I hope we can agree on this. I think our tradition's very pragmatic stance on this is clothing is very often a reflection of one's relationship with the world vis-a-vis ashram. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally.
And so, and that's why, again, I feel like this is where I would love to explore some common ground with you, where because I do agree with you that for a number of historical reasons, which we may or may not want to get into, but that there has been this sort of like painting over of and this expectation that everyone explicitly or implicitly sort of behave like a monastic.
Yeah, totally.
And that I think is a big part of the disconnect. And that I would be willing to say is a huge reason why, if we're not making the kind of growth that we could be making,
But do you think?
that's a huge
let me
reason
ask
why.
you this question. So do you think sticking only to the monastic thing versus grihastha, right? Putting aside, I'm flipping the thing now. Let's not at all talk about style of dress, Indian or mainstream American. Let's talk only ashram considerations here. Do you think that's an important factor, what we just talked about, what you described eloquently as a very important effect on the very slow growth of white, black, Hispanic, and other minorities in North America in terms of Vaishnavism?
I would say that is a part of it, and that in that instance, and I think we can agree on this, that the clothing, this what was the term used? Sartorial schizophrenia.
Sartorial schizophrenia.
That this sartorial schizophrenia or dissonance is, to me, a reflection of this greater confusion about ashram.
It also may be, question of like, we haven't determined, or we disagree, and I'm talking generally in terms of devotees, on what model does Gaudiya Vaishnavism belong out of those three models, you know, priest and congregation, dressing area.
Yeah.
I like this, so, and there's disagreements.
But what I think we agree on is neither of us, if I'm understanding correctly, and Nam, I don't mean to leave you out, but you tell me if this is accurate, and then I can say the three of us. Where I think the three of us are on the same page is that ISKCON, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, our tradition, the Bhaktivinoda Parivar, however we want to sort of classify us right now, I think the three of us can agree that model one is not the best analog. In other words, that if we are analogizing ourselves to the Hasidim, that's a problem.
But we are doing that.
But I think we all three agree that that's a problem. Do you agree?
Yeah.
I don't think it's a problem.
You don't think it's a problem. Okay, so then I think the two of us agree about that.
I mean, you look
The
at
guy
America,
with the Sika and shaved head.
Okay, so fair enough. So maybe I walked into that one. But
in America, aside from Chabad, who are really racist, by the way, like, because, without making generalizations, but I did study a little bit of Judaism, spoke to Jewish scholars. The Jewish community is sort of responsible for the salvation of the world. They're the chosen, people of God. So to the degree that they're very religious and devout, to that degree, things go well on earth, right? The salvation of the earth and the well-being of earth depends on them and them solely. That's why
I've heard Gaudiyas make that same type of argument, by the way. So I think
we have a lot
no
more.
one's got a patent on sort of spiritual arrogance, right?
When someone, granted, but at least theologically, vidya vinaya sampane brahmani gavihashina, we even see souls in animals, and all souls are equal. Here you approach someone like a Shabbat or Chabad? A Chabad person will approach you in the street and say, the first question, are you Jewish?
Are you Jewish? Yeah.
If you say no, well, then you're not even part of you're just like, these video games where there's animated, like, but they're I think they're
called NPCs. You're an NPC.
Yeah, NPC,
right?
Non-playable character or whatever.
So aside from Chabad and the Mennonites or the Amish who don't preach much at all, who don't have a missionary spirit to evangelize all tribes or to spread the glories of the holy name and the Harinam Sankirtan to everybody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, every town and village, I order every man and woman to accept, in the universe to accept. So those two groups, aside from that in America, there's no other group among the 333 million Americans where parishioners, not to speak of priests, where parishioners dress with a very distinct dress that distinguishes them from the rest of society.
I mean,
let me ask you this question. Did Prabhupada
are we including things like turbans and hijabs and stuff like that? Because then I think that complicates
Speaking
things
of turbans, did Prabhupada do to Vaishnavism what Guru Nanak did to Sikhism?
Which is what?
So I took a couple of courses on Sikhism.
Yeah.
I'm not at all an expert on Sikhism, but I did take 2 courses on Sikhism. The 8th guru in the Parampara, called Guru Gobind Singh,
Yeah.
he established a thing called the Khalsa. Right? Before the Khalsa, Sikhs had no uniforms at all, not even symbols that distinguished them from the Muslims and the Hindus. They came as they are. And that's what I claim. Like our philosophy, Bhagavatam, I always quote
Yeah.
from 10th canto, right?
Come as you are.
Come as you are, come as you are, come as you are. And that doesn't apply to the congregation only. I say that applies to the householder.
The Sikh example is, it's a little, I think, complicated though, because arguably before the establishment of the Khalsa, it's not even clear whether we could speak about a discrete Sikh tradition. And the Khalsa is really what solidifies it as a religion.
Right. There were various Sikh voices, but I don't think there was any type of distinctive religious uniform. So
Maybe not, but...
So assuming, let's go with it, that because that's what I heard from Professor Singh.
Yeah.
They're all Professor Singhs. It's kind of funny. So did Prabhupada do to Vaishnavism what Guru Gobind Singh did to Sikhism? So you have a tradition which, after Guru Nanak for centuries has no uniform. Let's go with it theoretically.
Yeah.
Come Guru Gobind Singh, he established the Khalsa, and now all of a sudden, to be a Sikh, you have to have those, the turban, the thing around your neck, the 5 Ks, right?
Yeah.
So we could say that I claim that Vaishnavism for centuries, and even going back to the time of the Mahabharata, never has, you don't see it in the pages of the Bhagavatam, you don't see it in the pages of Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Vaishnavas having a distinct uniform, whether they're Brahmins or Shudras or Kshatriyas or Vaishya, like cross ashram that distinguishes them from the rest of society. Come Prabhupada, who was so proud. What did Prabhupada so often say? That my only qualification is that I did not change anything. Of course, he did change things, but he was very proud about presenting. So come Prabhupada, all of a sudden, a tradition which is centuries old, if not millennial old, automatically now has a uniform for the priest and also the whole congregation. So did Prabhupada do to Vaishnavism what Guru Gobind Singh did to Sikhism? And my answer, based on what the Bhagavatam says, based on what Mahaprabhu's own example in Navadvip, based on basically, and his teachings to Raghunath, even say, before Raghunath takes sannyas, of course it was kind of a ruse to make his parents be pacified for some time. Before then he could really take sannyas and join him in Puri. But the instructions of Mahaprabhu to Raghunath pre-sannyas are there. And they're all about, don't be a falgu vairagi, don't be a crazy fellow, Prabhupada translates it. Practice your Krishna consciousness in a way that no one will even recognize you as a devotee, right? Perform your duties as an ordinary, person.
Blend in.
I mean, God's instruction to a householder.
I think we're still not so far away from when Srila Prabhupada was here on the planet. So naturally you'll get the disciples.
Here, can we, I think it's, because it ties into my example. I do not believe this says Loy Bazaar. So for those who don't know, Loy Bazaar is that, that market in Vrindavan where you can be darn sure the owners of their shops are super happy that devotees, think that they have to or they want to, the whole thing about wearing saris and dhotis, like, yeah, definitely, please come, because that's where basically all ISKCON devotees shop to get their devotional clothes, right? Based on social science, based on what we've seen, on scientific studies, in the studies of religious conversion, I do not believe that we'll be able to funnel 333 million Americans if we're talking about every town and village, like if we want to serve Mahaprabhu and in a missionary spirit to spread the holy name, if we're not into that, okay, but if we're in the spirit of we want to expand the mercy of Krishna and of the holy name and the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the Bhagavatam and have Americans, American politicians, Tulsi Gabbard ki jai, especially since she joined the Republican Party.
Wow.
And it is,
we're going there. We're going there, are we?
Yeah, and it's openly, pro-life. But, the day when we have doctors and politicians.
Also someone who very strongly leveraged her connection to the Indian and Hindu communities. So I don't know if you know,
I'm
for
saying
someone who's critical of
politicians.
Indianization and Hinduization, I don't know if Tulsi Gabbard's your best
Well, you don't
example.
see her very often in Sari. And so I don't think that we'll be able to funnel 333 million people through the funnel of Loy Bazaar.
You know, it's, I mean,
And I just, it ain't going to happen. Muhammad goes to, as the saying goes, you know, Muhammad goes to the mountain. It's not the mountain that goes to Muhammad. And let me tell you
the
this one
saying is
story.
actually, if Muhammad can't go to the mountain comes to Muhammad.
well,
so
Okay, but
it does go the other way sometimes.
Let me tell you a story that Badri Narayan Swami told
Yeah,
once.
and then I want to get back to the.
Okay.
I want to
Because it
talk
relates,
about Loy
it
Bazaar
relates-
also because
it relates to Loy Bazaar.
Yeah.
And the idea that, you know, we're going to funnel everybody through the funnel of Loy Bazaar. There's this, maybe a true story. It was a battleship, a U.S. battleship plowing through the ocean during some, whatever, at night. And on the radar, there's a light that shows up. You know, some ship, they think, you know, coming their way. You know that story? I think it's Stephen Covey tells that story, perhaps.
I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but
No, I don't know this story.
you don't.
Continue,
Okay, I'm
please.
not going to say the. I'm not going to. I'm not going
you've
to call
heard,
it what it's. Yeah. Anyway,
You heard this
I'm not
story.
going to say it. So, go ahead.
So according to the story, correct me if I'm wrong. So
Yeah, yeah.
so the lieutenant or the sergeant in charge of the battleship, you know, in his authoritative voice says, you know, hello or whatever, like, do you hear me? This is battleship, whatever, Natoma Bay. Natoma Bay is actually the battleship from with that kid, you know, who used to be, at least they claim he was a firefighter in the war against Japan and took birth as the,
reincarnated.
yeah, James Leininger, the story of that kid that had a past life.
Yeah,
These
yeah.
Children who remember their past lives are amazing evidence, I would say, or empiric evidence. But anyway, so let's say, so you know, Sergeant, you know, whatever, from to Natoma Bay, we request you to change your direction, right? And then the guy on the walkie-talkie calls back, kind of in a, you know, arrogant voice, like, hi guys, you know what? No, we're not going to change. And so everybody's shocked on board. And then again, like, no, you don't understand. This is Sergeant whatever, you know, Johnson from U.S., you know, SS or USS Natoma Bay. We order you on behalf of the U.S. Marines to change your course. And the reply is like, yeah, thanks for asking, but no, we're not going to change. So he goes back and forth. Finally, you know, like, we order you, and then, you know, this is USS Marines, you know, the Natoma Bay, blah, blah, battleship. And you're like, well, you're talking to the lighthouse,
Oh,
you know, on the
can't
coast
change.
here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we recommend you change your direction.
Right.
So in a similar way, like, I don't think pants and shirts and T-shirts and, you know, Mediterranean way of dressing is going to go anywhere in this country. And if we're going
So in
to,
other words, that's the lighthouse. We're not going to move that. So
we're not going to move that.
better we should course correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore our leaders should stop telling our new bhaktas to shave their heads and have shikas when they're going to have professional careers. And
So,
right?
So yeah.
To
So
tell them they have
let's
to start dressing.
Let's get to that.
Whatever.
Wait, so ashram devotees should not have shaved heads and sikas and dhotis.
Ashram devotees, perhaps, yeah. But let them wear saffron. What's the thing about wearing white for, like, wear saffron? And then when you want to get married, okay, then you, and I hate this thing, I wear white now, like wearing white.
Right.
No, now I wear my, you know, and hey, maybe there's a new bhakta does come from, I don't know, a traditional Jamaican community in America. And so when he comes back to, you know, non-monastic culture, he'll be wearing, you know, the typical Jamaican Rastafarian way of dressing, for example. And if he's able to get a job and, you know, and function in American society, great. You know, I'm not saying everyone should funnel through, but I am talking majority numbers here. That's why I kind of feel safe in making these generalizations, because again, like, numbers speak for themselves, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, and things may change, right? But as of today, you know, pants and shirts are kind of like the staple way of dressing in America. And so if I think tactically, you know, in terms of tactics, it's just not wise for us to, first of all, jeopardize the future of our children, you know, the professional career of our children, by making them look or sound right with a weird Sanskrit name, for example, that may, you know, studies show, and it's true. Like, I met one guy, I'll tell you a quick story. At one point I wanted to change my name, my legal name, from Cyril Wohrer to Chandrashekhara, middle name Acharya, Das, last name.
This is previous. You're saying
This was like before my going back to college, and
yeah.
and so I showed up at City Hall in Santa Monica I asked where the office was. They told me go to the 5th floor, office 32. I go there, and the lady gives me the thing to fill out. Go sit at any tables. There's like 6 or 7 tables. I sit down. I start filling out the form, and I hear Harry Bol. And I look up, and there's a white guy, and I could see, you know, like I could see he had Tulsi beads. I was like, Harry Bol. I'd never seen him before. And I was like, hi, I'm Chandrashekhara, what's your name? And he says, yeah, I'm something like Shivadakshai Vishnu, or some complicated Sanskrit name. My parents are Prabhupada disciples. We're in Oregon. I'm here for some time. And he tells me, so what are you doing? And so very proud, I say, well, I'm here to change my name from, you know, Cyril Wohrer to Chandrashekhara Acharya Das. What are you doing? And I swear to God, he says, I'm here to change my name from Shivadakshai Vishnu Das to
like Kevin or something.
Kevin Smith.
Oh my God.
And I was, who's Kevin Smith? He's like, well, that's just a name I pick because it's like really common. And I was like, why do you know, can you imagine the chances
so
of that happening?
funny.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
I was like, why are you doing that? He's like, because I've, you know, studies show that when you have a difficult name, it's harder to, you know, to climb up the professional ladder, right?
Yeah.
So it brings back to the, you know, why our
Why were you changing your
parents-
name, Chandra? Like, why? Like,
because I was misled into thinking
someone tell you like you should legally change your
Yeah,
name?
I
Because
got
that's
inspired by Shivaram Swami, who had done it. I had heard he had changed his passport name, and I thought that was great. And I'm so happy I didn't. I'm so happy I didn't.
Yeah.
If I've, you know, I don't think I'll have kids. But if I would have kids, I would, you know, give them perhaps a middle name. Actually, that's what Balavanta was. He agreed with. I saw Balavanta the other day in Atlanta. He confirmed that story about
you
American
mentioned that,
Christian
yeah.
Heart. You know, so same thing. Like, why are we why are we making it difficult not only for our own children to have a seamless, as you know, maybe they have their karma, unavoidable karma, but why are we complicating things for our own children? And then we wonder why they leave ISKCON. Oh, you know, why complicate things for our own children? And then also make it just raising that bar unnecessarily high. You know, 4 regs and sex only for you know, within marriage, and ideally only for procreation. You know, and if you're serious, 16 rounds, a 2-hour sadhana, which needs to be fed with, you know, hearing scripture at least for a half hour per day. Otherwise, you lose your taste for chanting. So you're talking about a minimum householder sadhana of like, you know, of an ideal standard of like 3 hours of sadhana per day. You can spread it out during the day, but heck, that's a lot.
That's
of
hard
work.
enough, is your
That's
point.
super
It's hard enough.
If we raise that bar
Yeah.
by even a tiny inch to a level which is not mandatory in scripture, what are we doing? How is that strategic in any way to fulfill the mission of Lord Chaitanya?
So I think
the
I
mission of Prabhupada?
think that's a compelling argument. Where I'm less comfortable is, well, we've already talked about the ethnic thing. I'm not going to bring that back up. But where I'm less comfortable is, and I'm not saying you're doing this right now, but what I've heard is sometimes, you know, it's like sort of going from one extreme to the other, saying it's super problematic to be told you must wear a dhoti to be a real devotee. I think it's, if not equally problematic, it's also very problematic to tell someone you must wear pants. You must never wear a dhoti, right? Like, let's burn all our dhoti, right? So in other words, why go from one extreme to another? Why not? Well, but Chandra, why not give people? Why not treat people like adults? Let them make their decisions.
Our body language right now for the large majority of the householders in ISKCON in America. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. Which Prabhupada disciple who's in the Grihastha ashram today, who's a GBC or a temple president or initiating guru, right, wears pants and shirts when he gives initiation or when he gives a class?
You're doing the same thing that you're trying to preach against, I think.
No. What I'm saying,
you're going from one prescriptive
but wait, let me
bullying
explain,
model to another.
I'm just saying. Right now, you're like, yeah, let's have a house in which the whole world can live, and I agree with you. But my point is, like, if I don't want to use the example of, I'm not going to go there. Right now, if today in ISKCON in 2024, you had 50% householders, regardless of ethnicity, who were representing as leaders, right?
Yes.
From morning to evening in Western clothes, and then you had the other 50%. Who were from morning to evening, you know, representing as spiritual authorities in traditional Indian clothes, right? Then I would say, yeah, you're right. Why stress it? Let it be like that, you know, because we see visual examples, like the new people see, but
I see what your point is. I see what your point is.
There is no example.
Okay.
I'm not a spiritual leader, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just one, like, Actually 5 years ago at a Rath Yatra in New York, I won't mention his name, but prominent American sannyasi came up to me, and this is, whatever. If it's to show off, let it be so. Let Nishingadev forgive me. But he came up to me and said, Chandrasekhar, and I was dressed like this. And he said, aside from the brahmacharis and sannyasis here, I wish all the men were dressed like you. So we don't see, there are no examples. That's why I so wish that people like Mahatma, like Vaisheshika, or like Kalakanta, or like your father-in-law, I mean, with, again, great soul.
Father.
Kripamoy, father-in-law.
Oh, father-in-law.
If Kripamoy, where is the example? So I don't get it.
No, but what if they
I don't
just
get your point. I mean, your point is valid, but it doesn't apply to the context of ISKCON. Let's be real. What do we have at ground level today?
But what if they just don't want to? They're adults and
that's what I'm kind of struggling to see.
Yeah, I'm struggling to see
it's personal
that.
choice. Like, does everyone have to be?
No, of course not.
No, but he's making
Bhakti Charu Swami used to say, I'll dress in diapers if it's necessary. It's just,
Right. There's something about being authentic to yourself and what you feel comfortable in your own skin.
How much pressure was there in the 70s? Where is that authenticity coming from?
I agree. But why?
The day when we have
Why take one high pressure kind of culty situation and replace it with another?
No, listen. I understand your point of what you were saying, that 50% should do the Western and 50% should do.
We're not saying that.
If you make that a rule or something, and
we can't legislate that.
No, I'm just saying if you did, and that would help maybe the visualness of of Krishna consciousness.
To Venkat's point,
I like that. I mean, I agree with you actually. But to be able to,
since we can't legislate, I'm calling to all of the Prabhus out there. Consider.
But we can't legislate.
Let's do this. Let's do this honestly, on this podcast right now. I took some notes, and we can fine tune it. I'm gonna offer you some draft language. If you agree and feel comfortable with it, honestly, I'm not being cheeky about this. Honestly, Nam and I and whoever else, whatever, we will get it to
get what?
We will get this language, this proposal of language around dress. We will get it to
the devotees you name.
We'll get it to an Uttama Prabhu. We'll get it to the a GBC level.
How I wish a Nuttama Prabhu, who's the ISKCON communication leader, dressed like you right now. That's just my personal choice. I'm expressing it. It's my right?
Yeah. Of course, you have your right to it. That's the beauty of it. Yeah.
Right. The American Krishna, and you know why I feel confident?
Krishna.
Because Prabhupada's right behind it, and Scripture.
But Chandra,
But Prabhupada's more behind the dhotis.
He's both. I mean,
he's both.
He's both. There's all
sorts
of quotes.
The most honest thing we could say.
And I think the quotes
of all those quotes that you have, I can also get equal quotes for
but most
dhotis.
most of them, if you actually look at them, most of them apply to brahmacharis and sannyasis.
Which is why I think let's have the ashram conversation.
Okay.
Why are you holding the funnel?
Can I say one thing about the funnel? Because first of all, I didn't know you were going to do the prop comic thing. So.
Oh, I was going to bring a kryptonite. Let me do the kryptonite. Tiny parenthesis. Just as kryptonite, because we're going to forget. Just as kryptonite is the Achilles heel of Superman, right? Like Superman is super powerful. He can do everything, a superhero, but you bring him some kryptonite and he just melts, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, my observation in ISKCON is that we can yukta vairagya, use yukta vairagya as a verb. We can yukta vairagya the heck out of food, right? Even in our most, orthodox world headquarters of Mayapur, you got these great pizzerias, right? So Italian
absolutely.
pizza, Italian food galore, right?
Right.
We can yukta vairagya, modern technology, punk rock music, you name it. But the kryptonite of ISKCON yukta vairagya, the kryptonite of grihasta ISKCON yukta vairagya,
A pair of pants.
A pair of pants. The pair of pants. You show a pair of pants. Let's engage this in Krishna's service. Oh no!
I feel.
I'm put that in the reel.
Chandra, I feel.
I'm gonna make it a reel.
I feel so sad.
You have to.
I feel so sad.
Why do you feel sad? Rejoice in my.
I feel so sad that you've had these experiences because.
But we see it. Otherwise,
and I feel very grateful for the spaces that I'm in where it's not been my experience.
Same with me. Same with me.
I wear.
You're lucky. Have you been to
Chandra? I bet if we opened up our closet side by side, I own more pants, more button downs, maybe even more. But that's a smart blazer. But probably more blazers and sports coats than you do.
I think you do.
I probably do. I probably have a. I mean, my wife says I have a little bit of a shopaholic problem. But the point is,
Hungry?
Chandra,
Have you been to ISKCON?
I haven't yet.
I haven't been there. I haven't been there either.
Try to.
We all run in different circles.
Well, that's part of the thing. We run in different. The funnel.
Let's
though.
talk about
First
the
of all,
funnel.
you know, the prop comic thing is hilarious. By the way, the fact that you actually brought a funnel that says Loy Bazaar.
Actually, I didn't because it was $15 to return it. So I was like, no.
I don't know who's going to get this reference, but you are officially the Carrot Top of ISKCON now. You're like the prop comic of ISKCON.
I was going to buy an actual prop of kryptonite. Please go on.
I get the point you're trying to make. The funny thing is, though, let me tell you, as someone who shops at Loy Bazaar quite a bit, and I want to give a shout out to the absolute best.
Rest in peace. Rajbihari.
Ganga Prasad,
Yeah, the one with the high voice.
the old school.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, he passed away.
He passed away during
With the high
COVID.
voice?
Yeah.
He was nice.
Yeah, he was really nice.
Ganga Prasad, opposite Sham Sundar.
And you know, he always wore pants.
He always wore pants.
He always wore pants.
That's the whole
He
thing.
did.
Isn't it funny? All the Bridgebasis, they're all in pants.
Well, that's
and we were like, no, we want to be Vedic. And they're like, yeah, give us your money. You know, and if you want to be really kind of cool, you got to wear that Rajasthani, you know, like, I don't know. I just find that I just don't like it.
Here's
you know?
why.
We're not our bodies.
And that's
Keep
okay.
it
You can
simple living.
Chandra,
like
you can have an aversion. You can have an aversion. You have the right to have an
express my
aversion.
aversion. I'm the guest on the podcast. Let me express another thing.
it.
There's this Christian 3 times a year convention called Exponential. It's non-denominational evangelical Christian. They get together at some mega church, and one on the East Coast, one in the Midwest, one on the East Coast. And it's like 3 or 4 days of a powwow and the theme is how to, multiply your churches, right? And you got a book this thick with all the breakout rooms, how to super specific stuff, how to organize a ministry for, women from the age of 50 to 65 from, Palestinian background, or how to run, a Christian kindergarten school, or how to, super specific
targets
with great pastors who come and give these, again, theology aside, but man, are they good with public speaking, And so the whole meditation obsession is, how to spread Christianity, right? And dress is like the last thing on their minds. The last thing, for God's sakes. They're just coming.
Well, they don't come from India.
They don't have to, right? It's
But wait a
not on their mind
second.
because they have to
second.
be.
But let me. No. Now they don't. Now they don't. But wait a sec. Where did Christianity come from? Who did Jesus was for the first time?
Yeah, that was so
wait.
long ago.
Right. So
Chandra, give us like 1,000 and a half years.
Yeah.
You're talking about a movement. You're talking about specifically with
at least we agree on the
ISKCON.
principle. So if you came up there. If you came in, like, hey guys, it's nice that we're talking about saving souls here, but don't you think it'd be nice if we kind of dressed like Palestinians dressed 2,000 years ago? Johnny Boy from Laguna Beach. They'd be like, who the hell is this guy? Like, what planet do you come from?
But Chandra, that's not the argument that I'm making. I'm with you.
But I just wanted to say, but we see that there's so much emphasis on, it's so much less user friendly. Wait. Let me just say one thing.
Yeah.
May I?
Please.
Thank you.
Please.
It's just so much.
Got to get back to the funnel.
It's just okay. Please go on.
Put the damn funnel down.
No, please finish.
No. Finish your
It's
thought.
just a lot more user friendly. It's just so much easier to go to your local Target. And granted, it comes from sweat lodges in China, but Loy Bazaar stuff also comes from sweat lodges in Rajasthan. So putting that aside, it's just so much. We're not our bodies. Put some Moda Goodness clothes on your bodies and get on with your business of hearing and chanting and performing the Yuga Dharma.
I agree with you.
Is that not the easiest thing to do? Why are we raising the bar and then telling the public of America, you know what? We believe in a spiritual science, the science of Bhakti Yoga, but in order to practice serious Bhakti Yoga, we are showing you the example. Even though we're telling you, no, you can do whatever you want.
I want to say something. I agree with you, but you can't legislate it, first of all. And secondly,
and
what you
I'm so
can...
grateful that we're having this podcast.
Yeah, but a way you could legislate it if you started a temple and you did the way you wanted to do.
Ashram. I thought about it. I'd love to. I hope I can do it in 55 years.
What do you mean it's not your ashram?
And I hope I can do it in 55 years. Because I think that type of opening a temple and stuff is...
That's not where you're at, life
It's a grihasta
stage-wise.
thing.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I'm not a grihasta. But I can do it maybe in 55 years.
Let's get to the we'll get to the legislating part.
You should answer like, what do you mean by 55 years?
What do you mean 55 years?
What I mean by 55
I didn't want to say like, oh, are you going to live that long? Or
He's not that old, dude.
I'm 50, right? 51. So
You're 51.
Yeah. So I reckon I'll live, let's say at most I live 30
great
years
for 51.
more. Thank you.
What do you attribute it to wearing pants?
Yeah.
Ralph
Lauren,
you live longer.
Most of my pants are Target.
okay, why 55 years? Why 55 years?
So I die in 30 years, right? And then I take birth with more of a grihasta-oriented karma as a human, man or woman, let's say man, in America. And, I go to college, to go to some sort of, maybe, we have a Vaishnava Bible college or a graduate school. We had one in Radhadesh on an undergraduate level a long time ago. Now it's a business school, but we're developing one. ISKCON is developing one in Gainesville, right? So maybe by then, you get an accredited, nice training, the equivalent of a Bible college. So, and then I get married young, 23, 24, whatever.
Mm-hmm. And then this thought out.
I open a center, right, at age 25 or something, and pastor the heck out of one community for 50 years, as we see all these amazing pastors do in the Christian world, right? So, in 55 years I could do it. But you're right. I mean, I wish, in a way, I wish, but it's just not I don't think it's, it's not my ashram to open.
Hold on a second. I don't think it's an ashram limitation to start a temple.
I like Billy Graham. I mean, it's not Billy Graham himself, but there's this idea of, evangelizing, being an evangelist versus being a pastor. Right. So the evangelist, and I like that dichotomy or that categorization. I think it works.
Yeah.
So applying that to ISKCON, the evangelist is the book distributor or the guy who goes, who organizes a Polish tour,
right.
Or who goes out to some front line where there's nobody there and plants seeds. That. And then you got the pastor who goes to the funerals and the weddings and, gives initiation. That's why I think grihastas should be the ones initiating more so than sannyasis. And that's why, shout out to people like Bhanu Swami and who refuse on ashram considerations to give initiation. Well, that's another topic.
Oh, he doesn't have any disciples?
No, he refuses. Not because he feels unqualified, because he thinks that that's
something it's not consistent with the...
Very cool. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So just to finish, what was I saying?
I think you were inviting me to use the funnel and...
No. We don't have much time.
Chandra, listen.
Yeah, speak about
if you take another birth...
Oh, yeah. So that's what
and you're going to do that, it's going to be complicated by the fact that you're going to take birth as an Indian American, probably a third or fourth generation, and then you're going to know what the heck I'm talking about as far.
Do it, because there's all sorts of Indian Americans preaching, in modern mainstream Western clothes.
I agree. By the way, I'm going to sneak it in anyway. But the Loy Bazaar thing, I get the point you're trying to make, but also I want to push back against this notion that
have you been to a Hillsong service?
No, but I've been to a service here.
I've been in North Point. I've been to other evangelical mega churches. Right. But back to Loy Bazaar, I do shop at Loy Bazaar, and I shop at Loy Bazaar for the same reason I shop at J. Crew, because I look good in their clothes, and I like looking good in their clothes, and I like wearing their clothes. I don't shop there because I'm under any illusion that it's bringing me closer to Krishna or it's Prabhupada, I interpret Prabhupada's purpose.
My question to you is, what's the body language to the rest of Americans? What's your body language? What are you telling the rest of Americans?
I'm not shopping at Loy Bazaar to wear clothes to go out and communicate things to the rest of Americans.
Non-verbal is precisely...
No, I'm not. I don't agree with that.
How are you going to dress at Rath Yatra?
Probably the way I'm dressed now. Okay. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm going to be full Sunday, my Sunday best.
But I feel like, anyway, we're not going to get there, but I feel like
we have to wrap it up.
If I have a point of some let's say suggestions for improvement, or I hear the passion in your voice. I think there's got to be some allowance for more personal choice and individuality. We can't go from prescriptive model A to prescriptive model B. You must be thou shalt be in a dhoti, or you're condemned to be forever a fringy, to, if you shop at Loy Bazaar, you're like screwing up the mission. It's, I'll tell you with Loy Bazaar also, I'm not getting into the whole story, but when I was in graduate school, I was TAing a course that actually was this wonderful study abroad where we took a group of students and they actually lived and studied in Vrindavan. Okay.
Cool.
None of the students were from an Indian background. And I think none of them had actually been to India. Many of them hadn't even been out of the country. So you want to talk about a cross section at a state school in New Jersey, cross section, mainstream America, as mainstream America as you can get, right? In some respects. They loved the experience. You know what they did practically every evening, and no ISKCON leader, I mean, this wasn't an ISKCON thing at all. No ISKCON leader, Gaudiya Vaishnava preacher, no one told them to do this. You know where they ended up practically every evening? At Loy Bazaar.
Okay.
You know what they did? Bought a bunch of clothes,
Okay.
had a bunch of fun doing it.
And then they went to their first day of work at their law firm or at the hospital, right? Or at the architecture firm back in
No,
Houston.
of course not. And that's why I think you're arguing with the straw man, at least as far as when you're sitting across from me, because I'm the last person to tell anyone to do that. I don't do that when I go to work, and I don't expect anyone else to do that.
Who is telling people to do that?
So who's telling people to do that?
Well, by their body language, everyone is. All the householder Prabhupada disciples are. By their body language,
Right.
they'll say, yeah, no, you can do whatever you want, but they themselves are always in a dhoti, always with a bald head and a ponytail, always with a
So you're
kurta.
saying what they're implicitly stating is, look, if you really want to be a real devotee,
Absolutely.
at some point you gotta
Otherwise,
do this.
why wouldn't they even,
So here's my proposal then, because I know we're running short on time, and
We are
this
running
has been really kind of exciting and cool, and yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity.
And I am great too, and I hope it was tolerable.
I want to read you. I just jotted down some notes just earlier today, but we can tweak. But I want to see what you think of this. Okay, this is a proposal for a sensible dress code or policy in ISKCON. Okay, so yes, you can't legislate, and I think we shouldn't legislate. That's part of the huge problem. We shouldn't legislate how people dress, but we can.
We can legislate the mode of goodness, though. Like, please, respectable, clean. That's mode of
No,
goodness.
and I don't think. But again, when I say legislate, I mean we can put forth a certain vision, a certain ideal. Right. At the end of the day, there's no ISKCON police that's going to come, hopefully, and barge into your closet or something. But here's the proposal, and I think it reflects a lot of what we talked about, if not everything. Okay, so bear with me. Proposal: if you are a non-monastic, a grihastha, a student, a single person who's working and living in the secular world, you don't live in an ashram, you're not a brahmachari,
Sounds
right?
good.
You should be completely free to, and let me add this, and are encouraged to dress in a way that is clean, modest, and in keeping with the culture that you are living in.
Including on the altar?
Let me get there. There should be no pressure to dress in any particular way, whether traditional, liturgical, monastic, including traditional, liturgical, or monastic clothing. And devotees should be taught not to cast aspersions on other devotees or on anyone based on their clothing, as long as what they're wearing is modest and clean.
Great point.
Do you like it?
Pundarik Vidyanidhi.
Great example.
Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Wow.
I also like that example because apparently he used some really amazing perfumes and colognes and stuff.
right?
And
And Gadadhar Pandit himself doubted him
Yeah.
and was offensive to him by judging him on externals.
so that's part A of my
Sounds
proposal.
great.
You like it?
I love it.
Okay. Part B. If you are a monastic,
But you didn't specify in what context, like dress in general?
oh, there's
or
a part
if you will?
C.
Okay.
If you're a monastic, you should mainly wear the monastic clothing representing our tradition, particularly in the style developed by our Bhaktivinoda Parivar lineage.
In principle, I agree, but look what the Bhagavatam describes of how monks dress. It's like dreadlocks.
No, but
and
that's
stuff,
why I'm
so
saying,
that could eventually change. Like it could evolve.
okay, it could.
yeah.
But for this moment in history, we're not so far removed from Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. So honoring that tradition, if you're a monastic,
for it.
you should mainly wear the monastic clothing, right? The top piece, the dhoti, etc., etc.
Not mostly, I would say, at important functions.
Monks can sometimes wear clean, modest, secular clothing according to what is
For them, it's
situationally
secular.
appropriate.
That's what's interesting. For the grihastas, it's not secular.
It's just what they wear.
It's just what they wear.
For instance, when safety or comfort while traveling makes wearing monastic robes impractical or detrimental.
Or at Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, right? Prabhupada told him, you should dress like a
Oh,
right?
we're on the same wavelength. In addition, exceptions to this general policy can be made for one who is both a monastic and working mainly in secular spaces, for instance, an academic teaching in secular universities,
Or outreach.
a monk who also holds a position as a public policy or NGO leader, etc. But we strongly encourage these monks to also wear monastic garb, keep the head shaven, etc., when at home, quote unquote, in order to clearly reflect their monastic vows and inspire other devotees in their monasticism. Do you agree?
Yep.
Third point, here's where we may differ. If you are performing ritual duties as a priest in a temple or other consecrated space, whether you are a monastic or a grihasta, you should wear the clothing that our tradition and lineage has designated in terms of ritual purity and while performing worship, i.e. on the altar. And then you're free to change into whatever is appropriate and preferred, and the preferred style of dress as based on the above.
So you're not
categories
talking about
and B.
Shravanam Kirtan or Bhagavat Mark here, like giving class, leading kirtans.
I'm talking specifically about ritual worship on the altar.
Right. No, because some arguments, which I don't buy, some argue that, giving class and like Mukhya, Mother Mukhya, I'll call her Mother Mukhya, in Alachua made the argument that, giving class or leading kirtan is a continuation, is an extension of what happens on the altar.
Right. I'm not making that argument. I'm not making that argument.
Well, I would, look, I don't think ISKCON is ready for pujaris wearing clean khakis and, a Mediterranean skirt, right? But I pray that we'll see that one day. So,
but for now, you think? I mean,
nothing what you said jumps out at me as radical in any way.
What about you? What do you think, Chandra?
I like most of it, but you're right. On the altar, theologically speaking, as long as the clothes are clean, I see no problem with a white person from Italy, or a black person from Nigeria, or a Chinese guy from Taiwan wearing their own traditional clothes, as long as they're clean, on the altar worshiping the Sri Murti.
Okay,
part of why I'm bringing this up, and what I want to put out there
I agree
is
with
that
99% of what you're saying. It's great. The first 2 points are wonderful.
So to me, I think this is a way of framing this same conversation that you're clearly But what's
the result? If we have that, what would be the result?
I think the result would be what
outside of the Indian diaspora, among other success. I mean, is that a success or not?
I think.
Is that a success? If ISKCON grows further outside of the Indian diaspora, like as the Indian,
it's a shame we don't have that much. I want to be conscious.
My question is, why do you not agree with me that it would be great to see more whites and more blacks? You do.
I think it would be great to see more of everyone.
Yeah.
But when I hear devotees like yourself framing it in terms of, the growth. First of all, you're making an assumption.
No, continue with your point.
Chandra, no. That's a further proposal.
So we agree.
But Chandra, and the reason
on a nice note, as opposed
the reason why I do feel
argument.
passionately about this, and why I will push back, is two things. One is there is an assumption that we, and I know I'm going to get some hate for this, but whatever, so be it. There is an assumption that we as an organization are already doing a fantastic job with the Indian and Indian American and Indian diaspora communities. And that is not a fact.
Yeah, you're right.
So you want to talk about growth? We can do so much better.
Like if we double down on the Indian diaspora, would even
if we were just
instead of having this schizophrenic thing like, we want all their money, but we don't want to preach to them. We're not going to get the low hanging fruit, but we do want to fundraise with them. We don't want to fundraise with anybody else. So we want their money, but you don't want them to come to the temple. Like that's weird.
Yeah.
It's not just weird, it sucks.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what we're talking about in terms of relevance, in terms of integration with the secular world, being world embracing. And I can tell you this as someone who my job is largely to work day in and day out with all sorts of young adults, but particularly young adults, second, third generation, Indian American, Hindu Americans. I can tell you we have, as an organization, we've barely touched that demographic.
Totally.
So I agree with you in terms of, the room for improvement for growth. But the reason that I do push back, and I am such a pain in your ass about this, is because I don't like the assumption that we're already doing this great job with the Indian community, and our real problem is we're just not getting enough non-Indians.
I'm not implying that.
And so
I did say it'd be great to grow in the Indian diaspora as well.
I think it would be great to grow in every way.
Out of the, I think, please go on.
And so what I think like a proposal like this, when it comes to clothing, and we can do similar ones when it comes to food, when it comes to other things, I think is a way that we as a tradition and as an organization can grow in terms of numbers, can grow in terms of spiritual advancement, and can grow in terms of maturity, and can grow in terms of genuine diversity and the genuine sort of, the dream of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to see these different world cultures and communities coming together in harmony. I think we can do that. And so, again, I think we're in agreement in terms of seeing growth. And I do feel like I do want to push back against what I feel like is unnecessarily polarizing framing of Western and Indian. I don't think we need it. None of those words even show up in this proposal that you just said you agreed with 99% of, right? Or 95% of.
Okay. Closing. We're going to end now. Closing statements. Probably you start.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for having me. It's great that you facilitate these discussions. Honestly, I don't know what to say. I mean, I think we've spoken a lot, and thank you, and thank you for watching.
Personally, I'm very grateful that you came on, even though you didn't exactly know what it would entail for, as far as this discussion, but you kind of put yourself out there, were vulnerable, and you trusted me and came out to do this. I appreciate it. I do.
My pleasure.
Venkata, your closing statement. You have to keep it to 30 seconds.
I'm grateful as well. I started this by saying I kind of had a prediction that we would agree on more things than we disagree about. And I think that is the case. I think I certainly feel closer to you in this moment than perhaps before we started. And I do think, and I'm happy that we are on the same page about so much. And I think I also feel good about where we disagree. I'm reminded of, and I don't know if Prabhupada coined this, but Prabhupada certainly seemed to like the analogy of two lawyers. And maybe it's the former lawyer in me, or my legal background, but this analogy of when two lawyers can get into a space, and sometimes it gets heated, and we can kind of exchange barbs and even like fire some shots, but then afterwards, when we're out of the courtroom, there's love and there's camaraderie.
Totally.
And totally. It's a big bad world out there, and
we're definitely on the same team.
And let's keep that in mind. Even as we acknowledge the importance of our differences and the importance of keeping dialogue and conversation going.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to get in contact with Chandrashekhara Prabhu, I'm going to put his contact, his Instagram, his Facebook, his YouTube in the description, so you can get in touch with him and get his content. And please remember to like, subscribe, share this podcast with your friends if you liked this discussion. And have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks. See you again.
Most problem.
Oh,
that's
nice.
There you go.
Krishna, Hare Krishna.